Okay, going to call to order the Malibu Planning Commission special meeting agenda for Monday, July 24th. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jennings. Here. Commissioner Mazza.
Here.
Commissioner Euring.
Here.
Vice Chair Marks.
Here.
Chair Pearson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Mazza.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as staff recommends, with continuing items 3B5 to August 7th, and to hear item 8A before item 3B1.
I'll second the motion.
I just have one observation. When we do change the order, it can impact public comment. I don't think this one's going to be a big deal. Do you expect much comment on this one if people were thinking it'd be later in the day?
I did contact the applicant on this in advance, but I didn't feel, I'm concerned with it. This is a lengthy agenda. I'm concerned at not getting to it again, right. And I think that's very unfair as well. So I did contact the applicant on it. But a good point.
As long as we don't expect much public comment, then I'm good.
Well, I would also, well, before we vote, I'd also request that staff, anytime we continue an item, they put it number 1. Doesn't have to be before consent, but it should not be last, if possible.
Yeah, we typically do. This one was just a little bit unusual just because it was a new business thing, but noted.
Right. And I know also that the agenda was already published because the meetings are so close together. So I understand that was different too. Can we have a vote on the agenda? Are all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone nay? Okay. Measure passes 5-0. We're moving forward. Can I have a report on the posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on July 14th, 2017, with the amended agenda posted on July 18th, 2017, and the second amended agenda posted on July 20th, 2017.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Do we have written or oral communications from the public on items not on the agenda? Okay, Commissioner comments, Jeff? Steve? John?
John, I keep getting my little yellow cards, and I just realized that they don't have a radius map anymore. And it doesn't appear that there's a radius map anywhere. So it's hard for me to know whether to recuse myself on some items. And tonight we have a question.
We actually do that analysis for you, and if we determine that you're within 500 feet and need to recuse yourself, we'll let you know. But if you ever have any questions, you can always contact us, and we'll help you figure that out.
So, for example, on 3B1, you checked and saw if Steve was within 500 feet of the chili cook-off?
Yes.
Okay.
He's not within the radius.
So, Trevor, we're covered if they're checking for us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sound like a yes.
Well, if you have information that's different from what you've referred to staff, you move or something like that, make staff aware so they can do the calculation correctly.
Anything else, John?
Nope.
Chris?
Not today.
Okay, quick comment here for everyone here. So I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with being here. We're gonna hear each item. Everyone has a chance to address each item. Applicant gets 15 minutes. Everyone else to speak basically gets 3. Fill out a speaker card if you want to. Our decisions will be made on our ability to make the findings in the staff report. And sometimes that's a complicated issue. It has nothing to do with who we like the most, who's been here the longest in Malibu, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. It's about the code. So that's how we make our decisions. If you don't agree, which is possible always, You can appeal our decision within 10 days to City Council, but we're doing our best. It has nothing to do with the style of the house or the property. It's nothing of that. It's the codes, some of which we may or may not like. So with that said, we are going to move forward, and our first item, 8A.
Well, oh, yeah, okay.
Did I miss something?
Nope.
Okay. Since my agenda is in a different order, give me a second. Status of code compliance for Tide Pool Gallery and the Royken Motel, continued from July 17th. Can I have a report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Pearson. First item on the agenda is the compliance update for the properties located at 22752 and 22762 PCH, known as the Royacon Motel and Tide Pool properties. In May of 2016, a planning clearance application for a health club at the Tide Pool property was submitted and approved. A condition of approval was to provide the required number of parking spaces for the existing office space and proposed health club as part of a pending administrative plan review submittal. An APR for the Tide Pool property was then applied for an interior and exterior remodel and restriping of the parking lot for the required parking. However, prior to the approval of the APR, the city received additional information indicating that the planning clearance application was not accurate and the property would not ultimately be able to provide the required parking for all associated uses and employees. The planning clearance was rescinded and the applicant was advised to apply for the use of the health club and any additional intended uses as part of the open zone change application in order to capture all intended uses. The following applications have been submitted and are currently being processed for the two properties. One, a local coastal program amendment and zone change from community commercial to commercial visitor 2. This application was submitted in 2015 and staff is currently working on an initial study. 2, a conditional use permit for the Tide Pool property for on-site alcohol consumption on the deck of the associated swimming pool. This application was submitted in December of 2016. A second conditional use permit was submitted in June of 2017 for the Tide Pool property to allow the accessory use of a health club for the motel. Also in June of 2017, a conditional use permit for the Royacon Motel was submitted to allow the operation of a visitor serving motel in a CV2 zone. The Tide Pool property also has a compliance agreement for the on-site wastewater treatment system, which is being addressed by the city's Environmental Sustainability Department. The applicant has been informed that all open planning applications will be processed concurrently in order to provide a complete and transparent proposal for both properties. In addition, Planning and Public Works will be requiring a parking study as part of the application in order to assess the overall parking requirements for both properties. On Thursday, Bonnie and I met with Patrick Perry at the office to discuss outstanding items and issues that needed to be addressed in order to move the planning applications forward. Patrick submitted documentation indicating that he will be the new applicant for both properties, and he and staff are available for questions tonight.
Thank you for that report. I want to remind the commissioners, this is a informative receive and file item. There is no vote or decision to be made, but with that, so I'd like to open the hearing if we can, and then, because we do have one speaker, and then we can come back here. Is that okay? Everyone good with that? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing, and we have Patrick Perry.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Perry. I'm an attorney for Wavebreak LLC, which is the owner of the Tide Pool property at 22762 Pacific Coast Highway. And I appreciate you moving this forward after having sat here for 4 hours last week and being continued. I don't necessarily disagree with the staff report, except for the fact that we were never informed in any formal manner of any rescission of the planning clearance. There were opportunities to do that, multiple opportunities, in fact. I understand that this was done orally with who was the project representative at the time, the project architect, but that information was never communicated verbally, certainly to the ownership, and was never communicated in writing to from the city to the ownership. So we had no idea. We did submit the application for the CUP in December for the alcohol use. We did receive correspondence back at that time. That correspondence didn't say anything about, no, your planning clearance has been rescinded, no, you can't proceed unless you provide a sufficient number of parking spaces or whatever other issues we needed to address. There was additional correspondence after that point where those points could have been made to us and they weren't. At this point, building permits were issued, the work was completed, has been signed off, final. We did get a planning department approval for the building permit application. We had no reason to think that there was anything other than full approval for what we were proceeding to do. So now a significant amount of investment has been made in the property. And then when everything was done, open for business, the health club, including the pool and the deck, open for business, we received a cease and desist order. We do not necessarily agree that the cease and desist order is valid. Nevertheless, in the spirit of cooperation, we have ceased operations of the health club. The health club was open to the public. It's a by right use in the CC zone, and that's why we proceeded. It didn't have to come to Planning Commission, and that's probably the reason why this is all coming to you new without any background. As part of that, throughout the process, we've been fully transparent as to what we were proposing to do. There's never been any effort to conceal or mislead anyone. The idea was we have a health club that's open to the public with a pool and a deck, and that in addition to members of the public, guest memberships would be extended to guests of the adjacent Ryokan motel. And that was in all of the documents that we submitted throughout the process. So we have an issue where we have a use, which we understood was permitted, constructed, and now has been suspended. We did submit applications for the zone change.
You have more time.
Okay. Yeah. Local coastal plan amendment, general plan amendment, and so forth. I think the most recent applications were in January of 2016. It's been over a year and a half. Once the applications, assuming they're approved by the city council, are completed, because it's a local coastal program amendment, it has to go to the Coastal Commission for approval. Only then can we get our conditional use permits for the motel uses approved and be able to combine everything together so that we have an exclusive use of all of the facilities only by the guests of the motel. We're looking at another year to a year and a half in order to be able to complete this process. Meanwhile, we've put the investment into the property with the expectation that it would be able to be used, and now we're in a position where we're not able to. What we would like to be able to do is cooperate, resolve any outstanding issues we have with staff, and be able to move forward and to be able to open the facility as we've proposed. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else want to address the commission on this item? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. As a receive and file, I just want to say, you haven't been on this project the whole time, right? Is that correct? Severine was before?
Well, she was the applicant. She's the project architect. I've been involved since 2014. We came forward at that point to request an extension of the amortization period. It's a legal non-conforming use. That was for what's now the Ryokan, former Casa Malibu Inn.
Right.
We requested that in 2014, and then I've been involved in trying to get the zone change, general plan amendments, conditional use permits, and so forth done. The actual construction, building permit applications, and so forth, that was Severine Tatangelo, the project architect.
Okay. I mean, a couple of points I would just make is, I know it's a long process. It's been frustrating. I think on both sides, from what I can see, there's been some issues here. Clearly on the May 16th approval, it does say what needs to happen next, and it didn't happen at that time. Now, maybe that was easy to miss. I don't know. But if you look at that paperwork, yes, there's an approval, but then there says what needs to happen next, which was an APR and for the remodel. And nowhere in that did it mention anything about employees being needed there or a change. So there was changes that happened, and I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm saying, but it makes a difference. And I think what's caught my attention that's frustrating is when John Maz and I sat on the deck with the applicant team to get that first approval. We said, well, clearly this is for the hotel, and they just said, no, it's not. It's just for the office building. It's not for any other usage. We said, well, you sure? Nope, just that. And it was clear that it was, and it is now, and that's frustrating. So I think it feels a lot like, to me personally, like piecemealing, and I think it's that's frustrating. It feels like little bits of this come along when they come along, and that makes the planning process really hard. That's my opinion from where I sit, from reading all the documents. That's why I asked you some questions on the phone today. Oh yeah, I didn't do disclosures. I guess we'll get back to that. I apologize. So my reading of it is it's very understandable why you're in this situation. And especially seeing social media with people drinking on the deck and all that of the pool or in the pool, it's easy for me to see how this is not the situation you wanted to end up in. But I would just urge to try and get your projects as a group, in my opinion, not speaking for anyone else, all together instead of coming in little bits, because that's how it feels to me. And I'm going to stop this quickly and do our disclosures. I apologize. Disclosures, Jeff? Oh, because the receive and file. So no disclosures needed?
We're not taking any action today. It's just a
Receive and
receive
file.
and file.
And then with that, I'm done.
I'm going to disclose. After the September 8th, 2015 approval, I appealed to the Coastal Commission. They accepted the appeal. And then I met with Severine and another lawyer, not you, I don't know who it was. And they promised me that if I would drop the appeal, the property would not be used until the ACDP was approved. That's verbal. It wasn't Coastal Commission, it was just to me. So it's not legal, I'm sure, but I withdrew the appeal on that promise. So I just want to disclose that. Okay, that's it. Oh, by the way, well, I don't need to do the rest, I guess.
And a quick question, Don, when you say went through the appeal, you mean you released the appeal based on that verbal?
I withdrew it from the Coastal Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a receive and file.
I want questions.
Oh,
I have a bunch of questions.
okay. Who's your question for?
Jessica. Okay. Did they get an extension of the requirement for CUP? This attorney mentioned that they asked for an extension.
The, excuse me, the Casa Malibu Inn, Casa Malibu Inn property did receive an extension of the CUP requirement.
Did the Tide Pool Gallery?
No.
So they do not have a CUP and they're 6 years past due?
No.
Well, they haven't, they don't have a CUP. They're legal nonconforming as an office or
As an office?
as a, well, I don't know what,
There's no CUP
that's right.
except a legal nonconforming office?
No, there's no CUP required. The
Okay.
existing use is permitted by right. Doesn't require a CUP for the tide pool property.
Well, that's questionable. Now, Jessica, what I don't understand is in our September 6, 2015 staff report, there's a lengthy discussion on piecemealing. And as I remember, we spent an hour on discussing all this stuff at least. And then it turns out, it appears to me, it's been piecemealed. The building's been remodeled, the uses have been changed, the pool's been opened. Exactly what we talked about at that meeting. So why is this not piecemealing? Change of use.
Don't believe I ever said that it was not piecemealing. I agree that it is piecemealing.
Okay, so if we say this in a staff report, then how does this, whatever this approval they gotten was withdrawn, how did that happen without us knowing about it? Wouldn't that have to come to us, the planning clearance? If this was declared piecemealing by the city planning commission, then how does the staff piecemeal?
Well, we should be careful here in terms of, piecemealing is a term that's used in CEQA, and we're not necessarily in that situation. I think what we're talking about here is that a series of approvals for this project have seemed to have been spilling out in a series. And there were requests at the time when we made the original project. Like there were questions to the applicant about whether what was coming down the pipe, what there was piecemealing, if there was other projects that were planned at that time, and they said there wasn't anything planned. They decided they wanted to make a office with a pool, and that was all that they decided they wanted to have at the time.
Right, and that
So-
morphed into a hotel swimming pool.
Well, that is not a hotel swimming pool at this point, and that's why it's been stopped. That was in violation of the what's been authorized in this situation. Now, the entire project will be coming before you. They have been applied an application for a zone change, and the rest of the project entitlements will be coming
So-
through, and we will have to deal with
So-
the
so-
environmental review and the entitlements at that time.
So as it stands now, they can't open the pool until they come to us, right?
Right now, they cannot open the pool. I don't want to ever say never. It'd have to come back to you. It depends on if they want to instead abandon any ideas of using that pool for the hotel and open a private health club, and they can provide enough parking for that and meet the requirements. I believe that's an as-right use in the zone. Then there's a potential they could use that pool as part of a health club, but they would need to be able to make the parking and meet the other requirements. That is not a use that would need to come before the Planning Commission. If they are going to use it as part of the hotel, I'm not aware of some way that it would be able to be approved without coming before the Planning Commission.
Okay, now, of course, there's this game, I understand, be played. You check into the hotel, you pay your resort fee, and you join some kind of club. But when the definition of a health club says, let's see, paying on a regular basis, a bona fide club, that's the recreational club. Private health club, which they say they have by right, that I think belongs to CPA, describes a health club, and this is from the staff report, means but is not limited to gymnasiums with full service facilities, including but not limited to showers, lockers, pools, and saunas. So they would have to have all of those features.
Well, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on what they could potentially do with a health club. At this point, they do not have approvals to be a health club, and they have agreed not to operate the pool at this time. If they start operating the pool, it would be in violation of the current approvals for the project and would be a matter for code enforcement.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get is to find out from staff, does staff feel it has the ability, without coming to the Planning Commission, to allow them to open the pool for use by people other than in that building?
No, I mean, we agree with the city attorney on that.
Okay, so it's essentially, until we hear about it, it's closed.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
I mean, with the caveats that Trevor outlined.
and that caveat said it's coming to us, right?
No.
I believe I said if they could find a way to get the parking and to meet the requirements of a health club, which is a permitted use by right, if they can meet all that, then that approval would not.
And that
before
would,
the
that would
Plan Commission.
include the
But
definition that's in the LCP.
there's a whole analysis that would need to go through by
Okay.
planning if they were going to operate as a health club rather than as a,
Now, the next question
Hotel.
would be, since they don't have a CUP, do they need to get one? They don't have an extension
a CUP for what? To do
for
what?
whatever they want to do.
Well, they only use a CUP if it's a conditional use of the property.
The proposal that has been submitted by the applicant in consultation with staff is to process the necessary zone changes and general plan amendment and all that stuff together with the conditional use permit approvals that would be needed in order to give them the use that they want, which is a motel complex on these two properties. We've also discussed a lot merger that would tie the whole thing together and make it clear that this whole thing is a motel, and all these uses are the uses associated with that. That's what we're studying in the initial study right now in conjunction with the zone changes. The reason we wanted to process all this stuff concurrently is so that everybody has a complete picture of what the vision is for the properties.
Okay, let me ask you about ABC. Does the motel have a liquor license?
The motel does have a liquor license, and I don't recall the exact terminology, but it's specific to hotel, motel type uses, and it's a fairly limited license.
Okay, and then the Tide Pool Gallery doesn't.
Not to my knowledge, right?
And to get one, you need to get a CUP approval by the city with ABC, right?
That's one of the CUPs that they have applied for, is for alcohol use on that property.
So that would come to us.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody drinks any booze by the pool, they're violating their ABC license.
They don't, to my knowledge, have an ABC
Well,
license at this point,
The
right?
people who were
There's-
there, if they're guests of the hotel, the motel are.
All I can tell you is that they don't have a CUP for alcohol
Okay.
use, and I'm not aware of an ABC license.
Okay, thank you.
Okay with that. And by the way, I just want to add, really well written. Jessica, thank you. That was very helpful and kind of complex catching up for a lot of us on figuring out what's going on. So with that, we're just going to receive and file. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on. We're now at the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to pull one of these 6 items on the consent calendar?
Yeah, I'd like to pull 3B1, 3B2, and 3B6 for questions.
3B1, 3B2, and 3B6.
Yeah, 2 and 6 for me also.
2 and 6 for Chris also. They're, okay. Then on 3B3, 4,
6 is continued, 5 is continued.
You can
3
just,
and
you can
4.
just move for the balance of the.
yes, so I'm going to move 3B3 and 3B4. Second, okay, so moved. Okay, can we have a staff report on 3B1? Oh, sorry. Consent item. All in favor of 3B3 and 3B4?
Aye.
1 sec, we pulled 1.
Yes. 1, 2, and 6 are pulled. So the motion was for 3B3 and 3B4. 5 is continued.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. There was a motion. People started voting. All in favor of 3B3 and 3B4?
Aye.
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 Okay, those 2 passed. Well, he kind of stopped in the middle. Now, can we have a report on 3B1?
Item 3B1 is for the annual chili cook-off. This will be the 35th annual chili cook-off held over the Labor Day weekend. The event will take place on the Malibu Bay Company lot with parking located, be the 88 parking as usual, will be located in the LA County building, the LA County Services building, and then additional parking will be located at City Hall as well as the parcel that's directly behind the Malibu Bay Company lot. The event will set up, they'll be beginning to set up before the Friday of the event, and the event will last Friday through Monday, and then after that it'll be the usual cleanup on the site. The event will run as it has in the previous years. It will be closing at 10 o'clock in the evening, which is consistent with what staff has done for the last at least, I'll say 8 years. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to ask them specifically for the project.
Okay, thank you. Trevor, remind me consent items. Now we have to do disclosures if they're pulled.
Yeah, if we're gonna do a, sure.
Okay, any disclosures on 3B1?
No.
No.
I met with Brenda when she was reviewing the permit, and we talked about what was going on. That's it.
And you didn't learn anything new?
No.
Okay. Any questions on 3B1, sorry.
My only question is on the conditions, and there's several conditions that that limit people from parking on Civic Center Way and Stewart Ranch Road. And they have supposed to have two security guards making sure those conditions are followed. And I'm wondering why in condition number 24, Civic Center Way is not included, because it is everywhere else. And it says you're not supposed to park on Civic Center Way. So that's always been my pet peeve, is they take all the parking for the park and everybody else on Civic Center Way. In fact, most years it's been blocked off. So I'm just wondering why you have all these other conditions and that one doesn't have it.
John, there's a Public Works document, item 21. It's, I think, the last doc in that set that does call out Civic Center explicitly. Maybe that would do it.
Yeah, no, they do. That's what I'm saying. There's all these conditions on Civic Center Way, and then 24, no signs, no basic enforcement.
It actually, let's see, condition 24 says applicants shall place no event parking signs at the intersection of Civic Center Way and Stewart Ranch Road, with event staff placed along the road to direct traffic to approved parking locations and discourage people from parking along Stewart Ranch Road. I see what you mean.
I want Stewart
well,
Ranch Road and Civic Center Way.
We'll make a note for if there is an event next year to make sure that is addressed, and in the meantime, communicate with the event staff to make sure that they cover both of those streets.
Okay, because this is about the fifth year I've asked that. So hopefully make a big note.
But just, John, really quick. So you're concerned with Civic Center Way, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Then look at the last page of the last doc in that set, and it says specifically that they will also monitor Civic Center Way because of the construction going on for the wastewater. So I think they do have something.
It's not in the resolution, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So with that assurance, next year it'll be okay. I move the item.
So you mean you're done with your questions?
I'm done with my questions.
Okay, we do have a speaker who says available for questions, Ernest Gordiana. Do you wish to speak?
He's not.
You are right. I'm off to a great start tonight.
So I move the item.
Okay, so does anyone wish to address the council or the commission on this item? No. Then I'm going to close. Oh.
We're approving this one, and next year they're going to say you can't park at Civic Center Way.
And we will make sure that the applicant has people monitoring Civic Center Way this year as well. Okay.
Excuse me, are you Ernest?
No. John Paola.
He's the applicant for the chili cook-off.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that's right. Just trying to get on record who is speaking, that's all. John Paola. Thank you, John. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Back here for a motion.
It's if there's no objection,
we
be
receive and
receive and file.
Okay.
I say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Don't have to do that?
Sorry,
Receive and file then.
You can just say, unless there's an objection, you can
Unless
say.
there's an objection, we receive and file.
Okay.
Okay, items received and filed. We're off to 3B2, Administrative Coastal Development Permit Number 17-063, an application to expand and upgrade the existing alternative on-site wastewater treatment system serving Trancas Country Market. We have a report, please.
Good evening, Chair Pearson. What you have before you is an administrative coastal development permit for a modification to the existing wastewater treatment system. Just to get something clear before we get too far into this, there was an error in the staff report. So this is once again just to remind everybody where the site is on the west end of town. The wastewater treatment area is located on the hillside above the gas station that's there and the parking lot that's accessed off of Trancas Canyon Road. You really can't see any of this because of the angle that you have when you look at the site from Pacific Coast Highway or from Trancas Canyon Road. What I would like to point out is that there was an error in the original publishing of the Administrative Coastal Development Permit, on the first page, the area that I've highlighted there in red is the correction. We had the wrong contact information for the applicant of the project in the original ACDP that was included with the packet, so that has been corrected. What was published on the website is correct, and also the official document, because this was caught before the actual issuance date. And the only change between this and what you have in your packet, once again, is simply the name of the applicant, so that we have the correct name of the firm that is representing the property owner. And as from what we learned in our previous item, the applicant is in the audience as well to answer any questions. But essentially what will happen is some of the existing septic tanks and equalization tanks will be repurposed, and the application includes the addition of additional treatment units. And this does expand the treatment capacity of that existing system, and that's why it is before you as a coastal development permit. Had it been just a repair or change out some equipment but maintain the capacity but increase the efficiency, that's something that could be processed. That's without a coastal development permit, it qualifies for an exemption. But once again, there's going to be a couple new treatment units added. They'll be located next to the existing treatment units, and they are essentially semi-subterranean, so there'll be a little bit of excavation to put those into the earth. I'm available for any questions as well as the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Disclosures?
None.
None.
I had a question for staff. If I happened to meet with the representative that leases these properties, and he let me know that this would allow them to increase this restaurant seating from, I think, some number in the 30s that was available to maybe 100 or something. I'm a little bit vague on the exact details. So my question to staff was, if they were still approved to handle that seating, even though now that the septic system would be able to handle more, and the answer was yes. So I did learn that. And
What was the answer? They are approved for more seating?
yes, they are.
I got big questions then.
Well,
No, look, well,
hang on. That was my question. So, because I know there's not a lot of the restaurant space being used now. It's actually only a little bit. So I was wondering what it meant when they expanded it and what they were approved for.
you can continue, and then I'll ask Richard to give you a little more background on what they have approvals for under their CUP. But go
Right,
ahead.
you did answer me, and
Okay.
but yeah, Richard's welcome if he wants to share that with all the commissioners. I
I'm
didn't
going to
bring
ask him anyway.
the detail, so maybe you should share that.
The application will not allow for the expansion of the restaurants at this time. This is simply just a coastal development permit to do work to the wastewater treatment system. In order for them to add another restaurant or make the existing restaurants any larger, the applicant will have to come back for either, if it's to make the existing restaurants larger, a conditional use permit amendment, or if it's another restaurant, we would do another conditional use permit. Currently, there are 2 restaurant conditional use permits for the site. One is for a restaurant that is an 80-seat restaurant, and the other is for a restaurant that is 140 seats. So as it stands today, they have the capacity for 220 seats. Any changes to that, and then we included a condition number 33, which is on page 7 of 8 of the ACDP, which says that no new restaurants or intensification of use is permitted that conflicts with the existing conditional use permit and CDP approvals, or CDP approvals. So simply what you're looking at tonight is strictly just the wastewater treatment system. Should they decide to come back and add a 3rd restaurant, I know that there was talk of a burger place for the last couple years. If they do want to proceed with that, it would come back before the commission for a conditional use permit, and at that time we would evaluate traffic impacts, where it is on site, and also demonstrate once again that the system has the capacity for it.
Thank you, Richard. And to clarify, I think I was just asking a question based on the leasing agent. I guess he obviously knew the center was struggling under the current wastewater treatment system, and so I think that's all he was reflecting, that this would allow them to do what they were already permitted for. But I was asking that question. Hey, hang on. We'll ask you in just 1 second. Any more questions?
Might as well. So Richard, when we did the parking analysis for this property, we came up with 220 allowable, for allowable for a 220 restaurant. If you come back, is this a CUP or a CDP as far as parking?
It would be a conditional use permit. The shopping center is currently parked, or it's going to sound repetitive if I say this. Let me just put it this way. The Trancas Market shopping center is parked as a shopping center and under our development standards, which is 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area, FAR. The site, I want to say, might be in the neighborhood of around 52,000 square feet total. That's with the market and all the little shops. And so we basically parked it at 5 spaces per 1,000. And so it would be to the Planning Commission's determination if they could still demonstrate that mix, a well-balanced mix of both short-term and long-term uses in order to qualify at that parking ratio, the 5 to 1,000. If the commission, when we evaluate the conditional use permit, feels that now there's an over-intensification of these longer-term uses like a restaurant, if the commission makes that determination, then you, for example, could start actually considering the uses separately, the retail component versus restaurants, which is parked at one space per 50 square feet of service area.
Okay, and this would not be considered piecemealing. Is there a need to fix the wastewater treatment plant, or is this just an expansion?
It's my understanding from the city engineers who reviewed this is that this upgrade, while yes, it does provide an expansion, it's increasing the overall efficiency of the system so that the water that's discharged will be treated better than it currently is my understanding.
It's had some problems.
Okay, and then my last question is, after we gave a CDP for the Trancas Center, over by the Shell station, a building magically appeared, which is observable easily from Trancas Canyon Road. Is this the same building you're talking about, and is it going to get bigger?
I believe the building you're referencing is it's essentially a mechanical room, equipment shed that's part of this septic area, equipment area that's up on the top there. That building is not proposed to be modified as part of this development. This development strictly is to repurposing some of the existing underground tanks, and then the addition of what's known as an Advantex pod. It's a treatment unit, and those pods are outside of the building, and they're, as I mentioned, semi-subterranean. They're partially buried.
So will there be a building around them?
No, there will not be. That building remains as is.
And how high will they stick up?
These units can range from anywhere from about 1 foot to 3 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. I would add there that neighbors in that area, if there was another building to go up there, they felt they never knew that building was going up, and they would definitely want to come down and talk about it because they were completely caught off guard. And they don't know if they missed it or what, but that little building caught those neighbors off guard, just FYI.
I believe that building was not story poled as part of the project because of its height. It was on the project plans. It's essentially a prefabricated shed, from my understanding. But you are correct. I don't believe that at the time the story poles that were erected were strictly on essentially what we thought was a separate parcel. We now learn that it's all one parcel. But those story poles were all on the House Market site, former House Market.
Okay, so I am going to open the public hearing now. And Mr. Guardiana?
Yes, Ernest
Yes.
Guadiana on behalf of the owner. Just to clarify, Chair Pearson, the issue with the restaurant, so as Richard stated, the restaurant's well, the resolution that approved the renovation of the Trancas Country Market allowed 2 CUPs, one for an 80-seat restaurant, one for a 140-seat restaurant. And due to the center's wastewater system, we've never even come close to having that amount of seats. We currently have a 50-seat restaurant and a 90-seat restaurant. And so our hopes are either to increase the size of one of those or potentially go back to the city and seek a CUP for the third. And in Commissioner Mazza, in regards to the parking, we are not planning on changing any of the parking, as we're not planning on increasing any of the, we are not expecting on over exceeding the CUPs that have been currently issued.
All right, well, thank you very much. Anyone else want to address the commission on this? Okay, then I'm closing the public hearing. And just to clarify, yeah, I'm having trouble speaking tonight, but yeah, I wasn't trying to insinuate. I was just trying to understand how this all factored together with the allowed restaurant seating as best I could. I'm going to receive and file this, if that's okay with everyone.
I did have a couple questions, just briefly. On the
Go ahead.
Sorry, there was like a study done about the flows for buildings A through R. Is that current flows? Is that proposed flows? What's the kind of background on that document?
I believe that the wastewater report that was submitted to the city shows both the existing flows and then what the new flows, anticipated flows will be.
Okay, well, this one only has one list, and what caught my eye was that one of the structures listed for retail had more flow projected than restaurant retail. Didn't quite make sense to me. Any insight into that?
Do you know which building that is by chance?
They called out the building A retail with 9,300 gallons per day versus restaurant retail building B at 3,900. It just seemed out of whack.
I do not have the report in front of me, but I believe that either we are potentially intending to place further uses in there, and we would do so with the city's approval. Just to have the ability to actually expand certain uses at the center would be nice. And that's the intention of the wastewater upgrade.
Okay, and then last, there was reference to a building R. It wasn't on the schedule, though, and that does have a restaurant. Do you know where the other restaurant would be then?
It's my understanding that there are 2 buildings. I believe building R is where the current 90-seat restaurant is. And we were thinking about potentially either increasing that so that it could actually support a 140-seat restaurant, or potentially going back to the city for a conditional use permit for a third restaurant. But in any event, we would not have any restaurant seating over the currently permitted 220 seats.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, I'm going to receive and file.
Receive and file, aye.
Okay, all right, there we go. Moving on, we're going to go to item 3B6. That's extension of coastal development permit number 12-075. A first request to extend the Planning Commission's approval of an application to allow for the repair of an existing previously permitted rock revetment and associated development. May we have a report, please?
This item is for, as you mentioned, the first extension of the existing coastal development permit. The property has recently changed hands, and the new owner of the property is the one who's going to be carrying out this work. As mentioned in his letter, the work would take place based off of what his coastal engineers have informed him, would take place in the late fall, almost early winter time frame. The reason for the extension is that while the applicant could, in theory, go down, get a building permit, and get started before the permit expire and have the permit expire during the work phase, the reason why they would prefer not to do that is the concern that was raised by the applicant's engineer was that if the tides aren't quite right, they won't be able to do the modifications to the rock revetment, which could cause the delay in the project, and they'd like to make sure that they have a valid permit so that if there are any delays based on the tides, they don't have to start over with a new permit, and that's the reason for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Disclosures, anyone?
No.
No.
Okay,
Only that I received copies of the emails that came from Don Schmitz's office. I'm not sure whether that's included as part of the record, but if it's not, I read it. It should be included.
okay. Any other disclosures? I,
Yeah, I believe that was distributed as correspondence, so it is part of the record.
And that had a photo of stairs at the back of that? Yeah.
And questions? John?
Well, my main question is that letter. It appears that the violation alleged, and I don't know if, is there a compliance issue with the city right now? And is that on the rock revetment where it's going to get fixed?
The owner is here this evening to speak about that. Yes, it is on the rock revetment that's part of the project, and our city's code enforcement staff, they are following up on this. I believe that they have a site inspection scheduled for tomorrow to see the extent of what has happened here. It seems that there is a existing beach access way between two properties. The beach access way is a little bit on everybody's property, and essentially we have someone trying to install a fence, and that's what this owner is trying to do. And at this point, I couldn't tell you if that fence is beyond any string lines or anything like that. Our code enforcement staff, as I mentioned, will go out to the site, photograph it, and then we can start working on what will be the solution to this problem. If it's permittable or if it has to be removed, we'll work our way down that road.
And that has nothing to do with this extension?
Correct. The work that
Okay.
took place was not part of the scope of work on the CDP. That CDP was for essentially modifying putting the rocks back where they belong. They've, over the years, have moved towards the ocean, and we now need to get them back landward.
So would they have to take out what they put in to move the rocks, or you don't know?
No.
I don't believe so, because this is the picture that I saw that was provided to me from Schmitz and Associates. It's at the top of the revetment, and the majority of the work that's taking place when we looked at this was at the toe of the revetment, moving the rocks that had drifted out towards the sea, push them back, and add some new rocks, is my understanding.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Are you the applicant?
I'm
Okay.
the owner.
Okay, I'll let you go first, but you have to give us your name and then fill out a speaker slip
Okay.
when you're done.
Okay.
Okay, we're opening the public hearing. What's your name?
Good evening. My name is Mike Amar. I recently purchased the property at 23936 Malibu Road, and I've been working on cleaning it up. And it's an old house, painting and some tile work, nothing major. And the application that I have to extend the permit is exactly as Mr. Malika prepared it. Just to give me some more time to make sure the tide is low so the repair can be done. The poles that were put in are on the very top of the stairs, strictly on my property. I have the survey, strictly 100% on my property on the top of the stairs. And the reason is to prevent trespassing. Since I bought the property a few months ago, I had 3 incidents of trespassing onto my property and theft of my employees' equipment during the work. So I have no gate at this time. I'm proposing to put a glass gate. And I spoke to Mr. Eric with code enforcement. He's not sure if this is a violation or not. I spoke to him this afternoon. He's gonna come out in the morning and look at it. He actually asked me to go to the planning desk in the morning and show them what I did and get their determination.
And just so you know, that has nothing to do with us here tonight.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know. I understand totally separate issues.
Okay.
What I'm applying is 100% different. I'm just explaining, nothing more, nothing less. So I'll leave you to ask me questions if you have any.
Okay, well, we're going to go to the next speaker, and then we'll let you know if we have questions. Thank you very much. Georgia Meisler?
You already know my name, Georgia Meisler with Schmitz and Associates, and I'm representing the neighbor. So we're simply requesting that you postpone this item until the violation is dealt with. I know that you're going to determine whether or not a violation is in place, but based on our analysis of code, it would appear so. He has installed the gate framing so far outside of the deck string line from what we can see in the photographs that we have available. and we would like the city to take the time to assess the violation and postpone this approval of the CDP extension until that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to address us on this item? Okay, I'm going to close public hearing, and please fill out a speaker slip. Kathleen over here can give you one. Yes, Jeff. Okay, I'll second, but we have a little discussion still.
I just have one question to Richard. Richard, it's my recollection that you cannot do any development seaward of a string line. Is that correct?
Yes, development is all supposed to be landward of the string line. We're not supposed to be going forward unless they apply for a string line modification.
Thank you. Right of up.
Okay, and just lastly, just for both people that spoke, just realize that the issues are separate. We are not code enforcement, so we can't make a ruling based on any potential code violation at all. It's not before us, it's not part of a public hearing. We are only talking about the extension. So they are separate items. We have,
You said to vote.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there you go. We're moving forward. Okay, we're off to 5A. Coastal Development Permit number 16-026, Site Plan Review number 16-029, and Demolition Permit number 16-027, an application for a new single-family residence detached garage remodel of the existing second unit and associated development. May we have and that's at 29458 Blue Water Road. May we have a report, please?
Commissioners, first, I just wanted to introduce Alex Campbell. He's one of our contract planners. He is going to be presenting the staff report.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. Like Bonnie said, my name is Alex Campbell. I'm actually presenting on behalf of Lily Rudolph, who presented this to you guys last time. Just a refresher, this was an ACDP back in June. Per your request, we worked on it and made it a full CDP, and we're bringing it back to you this evening. So item 5A, like we said, it's a full CDP now, located at 29458 Blue Water Road. It's an existing two-story single-family residence with an attached garage. It is located near the corner of Birdview Avenue and Blue Water Road. It's adjacent to a sparsely developed site, well-known site. And so I'll be going over the changes that we made and specifically addressing some of the concerns that we discussed at the previous hearing. So just a brief project description again. There's a demolition of an existing 3,488 square foot residence, retaining wall, fire pit, patio, and portions of a second unit. There will be a new 3,801 square foot single family residence constructed. There's also a basement light well, which we'll discuss before we'll get into a bit more detail about. There's a 748 square foot two-story second unit. This is actually a reduction from the second unit that's in existence right now. There's also a 504 square foot detached garage with a trellis. There's a new swimming pool and spa, a new patio and outdoor bar, barbecue area, and fire pit. There are actually two sports courts. One is a tennis court and the other is a bocce ball court. They will be replacing the existing wastewater. They'll be installing a new auto entry gate, creating a permeable driveway, redoing the landscaping, and there will be view permeable fencing. And there is 922 cubic yards of non-exempt grading. These are a few story pole photographs that were taken of the site. The first photo to the left is actually the second guest unit. It's kind of difficult to see, but that's the point that we're trying to make, is that the story poles are very similar to the existing development. The height of the building is very similar, as is the actual square footage on the ground. It's actually reduced from the original building, so it's a bit smaller. There haven't been any, there are no public view determinations present. There weren't any requested, which is another important thing to note. As you can see in the picture to the right, once again, the height is roughly the same as the existing structure. This is a photograph of the actual residence. This is one of the areas where they're adding a bit of floor area. Once again, in both of these photos, the height of the new residence is actually less than the existing in this portion. And then in the photo to the right, we're showing a little bit of an addition. So once again, the main residence. So we're just trying to show that the building footprint isn't substantially changing. Once again, the height is roughly the same. The footprint is also roughly the same. This is a picture of the existing residence with the attached garage. Once again, the garage will be detached within the new residence, but the residence will be expanded and it'll still fall within that same footprint. This is a photo of more of the expansion of the residence where there isn't anything on ground right now. It's important to note that even though the residence is growing a bit, it's about 300 square feet in difference. It's important to note that the second floor is actually not being fully built out, and that makes them comply with the 2/3 regulation, and also helps with some of the bulkiness of the design, so it's more visually appealing. Next slide. I just want to show you the demolition plan and what's actually being demolished and what's being added. The residence itself is being demolished. There is a retaining wall currently on site that will also be demolished. The fire pit and current patio areas will be demolished as well. Basically, the only thing remaining is the secondary unit. That's going to be remodeled. A majority of the unit will be staying, and they're just reducing a bit of square footage from there. Moving on to the site plan, things that are different and that will be added. Like I mentioned earlier, there'll be 2 sports courts, the tennis court, which is in that lower right-hand corner, the bocce ball court, which is further up north, abutting the street, the swimming pool. Those are the 3 main additions. Also the patio area and the detached garage, which is a whole new structure on the site. As you can see, the 2-story single-family residence is basically in the same area, and they're utilizing roughly the same footprint. So I just have a couple of elevations to show you so you can get a better idea of what the subject property looks like. The architect also has some renderings that they'll show to you as well so you can get a better feel of the site. This is the northern elevation and western elevation. One thing to note is that as you travel north of Blue Water, the elevation does increase. And so the way that this property is graded and the adjacent properties are graded, they somewhat step down so that once you're on that lot, you don't really see the lot adjacent to you. So even though it's a 2-story structure, you won't see much of that secondary structure, or sorry, that 2-story structure from the adjacent lots. So just wanted to make that clear. And so this is 2 more elevations, the southern side and the eastern portion. This gets back to what Commissioner Mazza was talking about at the last presentation. Looking at the basement and the light well, I just wanted to show this image again so we can orient ourselves. And then there's a new sectional that details that light well that I'll show to you in a second. So I believe this shows the light well and the daylighting more clearly than we discussed before. That 2.5 foot difference is shown much more clearly, and it shows that we're within that 3-foot requirement, and that it is compliant with that policy 4. I don't know if there's any more detailed questions about that, but we just wanted to put that in there so that it's very clear that we're not exceeding that 3 feet. So getting down to neighborhood character, I know this was a big discussion at the last presentation, and so we included the actual table that we use within the report to detail, what's going on within the surrounding neighborhood, the different structures, and seeing how the new proposed development fits into the neighborhood. So the proposed parcel, the parcel size is nearly 30,000 square feet, which is actually, fairly small compared to some of those adjacent properties. The home size is 3,801 square feet, and it's 2 stories like we discussed earlier. Several properties north of there, 29451 and 29445 Blue Water. Those two are slightly smaller. One is a 2-story house, one is a single-story house. When we go to the northeast, there's a much larger parcel, 29441 Blue Water. That's a 7,551 square foot home. That's also 2 stories. So we're just trying to show that there are properties that are smaller, there are properties that are bigger. This development kind of fits sandwiched in between. And it's pretty much like that up and down Blue Water. One thing to note, though, that once you get to Birdview and closer to the ocean, a lot of those homes are newer. They've been redeveloped more recently, and they have maximized or gotten a lot closer to their total developmental square footage. And so they're much larger than the proposed site that we're discussing tonight. So it really fits in between, the transition of the newer homes and some of the older homes as well. There has been a correspondence for this project. Dr. Henry Blair, which he owns the property adjacent, to the project that we're talking about this evening. He sent an email on June 1st, which I believe was the first hearing, and as well today. He's basically objecting to the 22 to 24 foot structures, which is why we have the site plan review. And, he just had concerns about height. But like I said earlier, the lots are graded and they step down as you travel down Blue Water. He's actually south of this property, and to my knowledge, he can't really see the second story of the proposed property. And furthermore, since he's south of this property, his lines of the ocean are still intact because this property is behind him, essentially. However, he did express those concerns, and I wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that. So to conclude, this project is consistent with all the applicable development standards. All appropriate findings have been made, including site plan review. Based on the surrounding neighborhood and the character of the community, we do feel that this proposed project fits within that realm. Staff recommends that we adopt resolution number 17-43, approving the CDP number 16026, the site plan review 16029, and demolition permit number 16027. Josh and I are available for any questions.
Okay, excellent report. It makes me glad we brought this back for CDP. Very solid understanding of the project now. Disclosures.
Yes, I visited
By your mic.
to basically to get a look at the topographical data and to see the nature and size of the surrounding properties. But apart from their physical characteristics, I didn't learn anything that's not in the staff report.
Steve?
Yes, Commissioner Pearson and I previously visited the property when it came up the first time. We disclosed that. We went back and saw it again today. Met with the applicant and their general contractor, sort of getting confirming what we had learned previously. Now, one of the things we did do is Mr. Blair's house, we walked down to his house to take a look back up to make sure that, just to see what he was talking about. And you can't see the house from his house. But one of the reasons is because of the fence, the foliage fence that is around the property. And what I learned from walking down there was how important that foliage fence is to the character of that neighborhood.
John?
I met with Joseph Zamo and Michael McDonald, reviewed the property, walked it, saw where the light well was, basically learned nothing that wasn't in the staff report.
Okay, Chris?
And no disclosures.
As Commissioner Euring said, we visited today, met with Mr. McDonald and with Joseph, and I would add that I also, when we walked down to Mr. Blair's house, what I also learned, it wasn't just the foliage wall, is that what you called it? Yeah. Go with that. But it was also, there's a tree that actually is on a different property entirely, or maybe the applicant party, I'm not sure, but you can't see the second story at all because of that tree, even if the foliage wall is gone. You could see down lower, which is interesting, but you wouldn't see up higher. And I also learned that the foliage wall is creating a aesthetic divide between the immediate neighbor heading down the hill, and that I don't think anyone's happy about that part of it, because it'll clearly just have two houses sitting right next to each other, which is actually kind of a bummer and will not be a very nice neighborhood character. So that's the disclosures. Questions? Chris?
Yeah, I had one on the area that's being constructed. You show the story poles. I didn't make a site visit, unfortunately, but that section, is that going higher than the allowable, or only the existing structure? Like, that looked like it was under 18. What was your observation there? Or did that make sense, first of all?
Which part? I think the existing two-story structure is essentially remaining. So it's 2 stories, it exceeds 18 feet, it's still gonna exceed 18 feet as proposed. There's a minor reduction from 24 feet to 22 feet as part of the guest house remodel, essentially. So you essentially end up with a slight reduction in the guest house, maintaining essentially the same height, overall structure height. There are some components of the roof elevation that are a bit lower in this proposed design than currently exist, and that's because they actually are doing Alex described it in his staff report, a nice job of consolidating that second floor elevation so that some parts that are currently 2-story actually convert down to a 1-story elevation as part of the redesign.
Got it. I think Alex interpreted me correctly. So this section that's proposed, that's all under 18 feet, or is some of that at 24 also?
I think that portion, I think some of it's at 24, I believe, that portion there. It's sort of tough to tell which side it's on based on the picture, but my understanding is that that portion is actually at 24. And it's a little difficult to tell the difference, but maybe the applicant can talk about it as part of their presentation, but my recollection is, or my understanding is that's 24 feet in height, that specific photograph.
Okay, and then in terms of where the either complaining neighbor or just that nearest property, when we kind of laughed at this is really going to be close to a neighboring place, that I assume is at that closest point, kind of the far left in the photo?
That's at the opposite side.
Building.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because you kind of lose perspective based on the photograph, but yeah, the portion closest to the existing residence that Mr. Pearson and Mr. Euring were talking about, there's actually going to be that 18-foot, kind of that lower elevation closest there, and then once you get to about the middle portion of the kind of the bottom floor, if you will, then you have that kind of 2-story rectangle placed on top at an angle.
Okay, so then just to play it back, this section is like not in anybody's quote-unquote face. It's kind of, it's not directly adjacent to some other property. It's got a little buffer. Okay, and then the existing structure is actually being reduced in height nearest to that neighbor.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You've never not had a question, so John?
Okay, these are simple questions. Is there a sports court fence, and is it limited to 6 feet?
Yes, there is a sports court fence. It is 6 feet and it's view permeable.
So, okay, great. So that's, and then the next question, then we'll listen to Joseph, is when you did the analysis of the neighborhood, why didn't you use the TDSF? I mean, this property is substantially higher than 3,800 square feet. And then apples and oranges?
The reason why we focused on the main residence is that's the bulkiest part of the structure. In terms of TDSF, a lot of the older homes, typically are just the main residence and a garage. If we did that, I think it would be a bit skewed. So I think you're right. It might be apples and oranges. I think it was a better comparison to just compare the residents, if it was two-story or not, and how large they were. And based on that, there was a really large variation. And I think that this structure fit within that variation fairly well. You could go either way. I think it wouldn't be as fair, if you will, to compare the TDSF necessarily, just because the older homes typically would have less, I would say, than the newer ones.
Another issue with TDSF is depending on the vintage of the home, we may not have that information, and so the easiest source of information is the assessor data. So that's what we use most often.
Yeah, the only reason I question that is we have pretty big secondary structures on a lot of houses, so I wouldn't want that to be the method.
Well, just briefly, John, if I can add, one other observation is just throwing out the bottom and top on the numbers that were put up there, not hitting 10, but just going with that part of the rule. We're at 3,800 on the, or 3,100 on the average versus 38, so already 20% higher than that average. So if we did properly account for that, it's pushing.
Well, that was going to be my question. You didn't use 10, and you didn't use the neighborhood neighborhood standards. I get confused. No, I think Joseph did, and so maybe you can answer that. But okay.
And just to be clear, that like we talked about last time, the site plan review requires a discussion or findings on the effects on neighborhood character, and it is distinct from the neighborhood standards analysis. So.
Well, I know. I'm just going by our very vague presentation last time and the city council's very vague discussion, if I may characterize it that way. Now, the last question is, if this house is not completed before the lighting ordinance is adopted, is this house covered under the lighting ordinance?
The lighting ordinance, in its form today, in its draft form today, includes a compliance period that would require existing developments to comply within a certain period of time after adoption of the ordinance.
Oh, I know that. I'm just wondering if you're not done yet, are you covered or are you not covered?
If this application is approved and permitted before the lighting ordinance goes into effect, then it'll exist in its current form until the compliance period triggers.
So if the compliance period is proposed to be 2 years, if they got 4 extensions, they would be under it anyway, right? It's not when they start building, it's when the lighting ordinance goes in.
The compliance period will be a hard date.
Right.
It'll be, just as an example, within 24 months of adoption of the ordinance. It won't be tied to when a permit is issued.
Right. So if they didn't start by that 24 months, they're covered. If they don't, they aren't. Okay.
Jeff?
That raises a question in my mind, because as I read the lighting ordinance, there was a special provision that said that anybody that's under an existing permit that has lighting features in it, you're automatically covered right now, not later, now. Is that not correct? And if that's not what you meant, then maybe you guys better go back and take another look at the lighting ordinance. Just a point.
Which would mean it doesn't matter to us tonight. It hasn't been adopted yet.
Right, it hasn't been adopted yet. I'll take a look at that, but that's what I said was my recollection.
Mr. Uring?
Yes, two things. And one, and this is just to help me out, what I've been trying to do is every week take a project and go back and track it back to the code so I learn more of what's going on. You've got a stairwell with a door to the basement. I can't find that written anyplace. How do you get there?
What do you mean? You mean how do you get down to the basement?
Where is it? I understand the process. It says you've got to have you got a light well, right? You got a window so people can get out. But this has got a stairway with a door to the basement.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how and I couldn't find that. It may be there and I just didn't see it.
You mean like a standard that says you must have a door and a stairwell?
Or there's a permit you to have a door and a stairwell.
Well, the actual, correct me if I'm wrong, Bonnie, but the development standard doesn't specify, basements can be designed with a number of different options to get out of the basement. Stairwells one way. I've seen other ones that literally have a vertical wall adjacent to it where you actually have a ladder attached to it. And as long as you can meet the minimum building code criteria for safe access in and out of the basement, then sometimes the ladder is sufficient. There are limitations, though, on the actual width of the light well itself. And obviously the limitation on the amount in which a basement can daylight above the adjacent finished grade. Now, the code is somewhat vague with respect to those standards, and they're actually contained in the planning department's, there's an exhibit contained in the planner's interpretation manual that provides much more specific guidance on how to appropriately design a basement. So you start with the code. The next step is to actually look at the interpretation and the associated exhibit that's associated with with some of the more vague standards, if you will, and then you base your determination of consistency based on those two combined documents as opposed to just referring to the code. So it's something that we planners struggle with pretty consistently because, again, if you just read the code, it's very unclear how to design your basement. You have to sort of take that next step and look at the interpretation and look at the exhibit and then determine if it complies.
Now, why do you say it's vague when the code says a basement shall not daylight more than 3 feet and is allowed one opening of 18 feet for a garage?
Well,
that's exactly what it says. That's
true.
Not real vague.
Well, Mr. Uring also, though, was talking about whether or not a stairwell is required or whether or not you have another option for getting into the basement. It also doesn't specify the specific width of the light well in the code. That's specified in the interpretation. So again, I guess vague was a poor choice of words. I would say it's subject to interpretation. So to get a more complete interpretation of the standard, you should look at both and not just focus on the municipal code.
But
it is our intention when we are updating the code to codify more specifics about light wells. It has been discussed over and over again at the commission level, and project applicants frequently have questions. And so in the interim, we've created a policy which we discussed with the zoning ordinance revisions and code enforcement subcommittee to get their input of the city council, to get their input on a reference to use in the meantime to kind of give everybody a sense of what the latitude is to incorporate basements and light wells and things like that. But we do plan to codify that.
Well, I have a question to Trevor then. Trevor, if the municipal code says, and adopted by the city council, said a basement shall be, and that gives a definition, doesn't have light wells, it doesn't have any entrances other than specifically says one entrance. Can staff or Zoraces change the code without the city council?
Well, you can amend the code just through an interpretation, but if there is room for interpretation in the code, then Zoraces or planning, can provide guidance to have consistency in terms of how that's interpreted. Also, I believe, is there a potential conflict with the building code, Bonnie?
The building code has certain
Which is also adopted
requirements
by the
for, yes, for ingress and egress out of basements. And so that's where, that isn't something the planners refer to all the time. So that's why we decided to try to provide more clarity to applicants, staff, and the commission about what we can all operate with until it gets codified.
Well, as I remember, and I haven't read this for a number of years, but the building code specifies what a light well is. It's 3 by 4 feet.
Okay, I don't want to start a general discussion on light wells. We can ask to bring that back as a separate item, but I want to stick to this agenda item, if that's okay.
That's in this agenda item.
Well, not a general discussion of, it is not. It's a very specific project. Do you have a specific question?
I have, yeah, I got
Okay.
that. And Chair, this is maybe your idea, so you may want to bring this up. Looking at that hedge, I guess the hedge is going to get cut down or reduced
Well, the heads is going to be reduced to be consistent with the code, is really the bottom line. You know, if and there, in my opinion, there's not a lot of flexibility there. Our standard has been if you propose a new CDP and are demolishing the house and replacing the structures in a situation where you exceed the remodel flexibility provisions, you need to bring your house and your landscaping and your fencing up to code.
Can I make a comment? I just want, and Jeff will remember this. In my memory, in 26 years, one hedge has been approved taller than 6 feet, and that was Jack Lemmon on Broad Beach because his neighbor was messing with it, and he was a movie star. And it went all the way to City Council, and they got a specific variance for that one hedge, right?
Well, we can get to discussion on that. I'm going to open the public hearing now, and we have one speaker. It'll be Joseph Lazama. Joseph?
Yeah.
Okay, you have 3 minutes left now. I'm kidding.
Good evening, Chairperson and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Joseph Lazama of Burgeon Associate Architects, 24911 PCH, Malibu. The project we're being before you tonight is 29458 Blue Water Road. It's a modern proposal for the Casoy family, designed by Doug Burge. 24958 Blue Water Road is located on Point Dume and is bordered by vacant properties to the south and east, an existing single-family residential development to the west, and Blue Water Road to the north. Here in red, you see the 4-to-1 and steeper slope present on the property. This is important to note because on Point Dume, development upon these slopes is prohibited. Knowing these limitations, we worked extensively with the client to come up with a design that fit their needs, as well as the applicable development standards and the neighborhood character. The demo permit associated with the CDP application includes a complete demolition of the existing 2-story single-family residence, block garden wall and railroad tie steps, flagstone fire pit, circular planter, and the demolition of 2 portions of the guest house totaling 166 square feet. Our project has been found to be in compliance with the majority of the development standards required of this RR1 zone property. Since our clients felt that their needs could be met with the development allowed by the LCP, we did not elect to pursue an increased height, structure size, or development area beyond the letter of the LCP with the neighborhood standards discretionary request. We are pursuing the approval of a modern project that includes a new single-family residence, outdoor living space, detached garage, remodeled second unit, pool and spa, parking trellis, and sports court, as well as a new septic system. These items are all rendered into this image imagined from the west corner of the property. As previously mentioned, our proposed project has been found to comply with a majority of development standards. In order to cluster development and preserve the existing building plans, we are applying to build above 18 feet, but not above 24 feet with the discretion of a site plan review. With neighborhood character being the most discussed finding in recent months, we have prepared statements that we feel support the making of finding number 2, the finding that states that the project does not adversely affect neighborhood character. I apologize for that being so small up there. It's our understanding that the City Council has not given the Planning Commission a definition of neighborhood character. So we look towards this small code section from the general plan for guidance. The general plan states that the essential character of Point Dume is a predominance of single-family homes on lots that are extremely large for parcels on the ocean side of Pacific Coast Highway. Point Dume has a lack of sidewalks and streetlights, as well as roads which are rarely straight or flat all of which adds to the rural atmosphere present on Point Dume. Many homes have ocean views or sounds, while others have mountain views. The surrounding beaches are both traditional Southern California wide sandy beaches, such as Westward Beach Road, as well as more unique beaches, such as Big Dume Beach, which has extensive tide pools. Original construction on Point Dume customarily consisted of single-story ranch-style homes in the 2,000 square foot range with building standard type interior finishes. However, most homes constructed on Point Dume since approximately 1985 have been large, often finished in an opulent style and with widely divergent styles, and such homes now constitute a significant, although not overwhelming, portion of Point Dume. Such larger homes are particularly prevalent on the perimeter drives and bluff streets, such as Cliffside and Birdview, while original styles are located on other streets like Wandermere. Although single-family residences predominate, a few multi-unit structures were also built on Point Dume. Multi-unit structures on single lots were not part of the original neighborhood character or architecture, and still are not, nor have multiple unit structures been completed recently on Point Dume. Although multiple unit structures are rare on Point Dume, a significant number of them have recently been built in close proximity. They're on the opposite side of PGH, and they describe it as the non-beach side. The number of multi-unit structures in the area is therefore at a saturation point. Point Dume contains a mobile home park on the tip of the point at the end of Heathercliff Road. Most of the lots on Point Dume have been built out, although sporadic, unimproved lots remain. This general plan section goes on to describe commercial, residential, traffic, crime, and other hazard patterns on Point Dume, but we feel that it's most important to note that even at the time of the city's incorporation, there was a strong understanding of the amount of square footage and type of construction to come. If the language of the general plan tells the story of Point Dume, then the MMC and the LCP enforce and predict its growth. This slide depicts the area we studied in our comprehensive look at size, bulk, and height around the subject property. Out of the 38 developed properties in within 500 feet of our project, 30 of them make up our neighborhood standard. The average square footage of our neighborhood standard is 3,311 square feet, and the average square footage to land ratio is 9.36%. With our project being only 313 square feet larger than the existing single-family residence, our ratio is 13.02% and is in the 75th percentile of this neighborhood standard. We feel it's important to note that the property, as is, has a square footage to land ratio of 11.70% and is in the 73rd percentile of the neighborhood standard. Not only does the size of our project respect neighborhood character, but the location does as well. Superimposed here in red are the outlines of the existing single-family residence and guest house. I trust that you will find that we are positioning the project in the exact same location as the existing structures. This is further exemplified by the positioning of our story poles directly on top and immediately against the existing structures. Although the setbacks required of this property allowed for development to be positioned elsewhere, we felt that there was no better way to preserve neighborhood character than to build in the exact same spot as the existing structures. At our last hearing, you had a question about the light well we were proposing for emergency ingress and egress. These exhibits show how beyond the light well, no more than 3 feet of the basement will daylight and therefore complies with LCP policy number 4. In closing, there were some questions that came up during staff's report that we could shed some light on. The hedge, it'd be nice if we could keep it during construction to mitigate noise and dust and assess the ability to keep it or cut it down to 42 inches as proposed prior to the final approval of our construction. The picture discussed at the tail end of staff's report was actually of the garage and the trellis. It's not attached to our proposed development, and that has a height of 13 feet, 10.5 inches. And I spoke with a client during the discussion of the lighting ordinance, and they are on board with the lighting ordinance, and and volunteer their ability to comply if need be. This concludes the presentation for this evening. The contractor as well as myself are here for any questions that you may have of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the commission on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing, and just want to say quickly, Joseph, the video is entertaining, though I was worried there was speeding going on there. It looked like somebody was absolutely hauling ass. I was a little worried about that.
I wasn't sure how entertaining you'd find my voice, so the video is sped up to twice the speed at which I was driving. So yeah, I definitely took it slow. I just trying to get you the information.
I already reported you, but it's too late. Okay. Okay, so we're back at the commission now. Discussion?
Question?
Oh, yeah. Questions, discussion?
Joseph, did you do a study that took the nearest 10 houses and eliminated the biggest and lowest and used total square footage?
I didn't do one that only did 10. I studied a 500-foot radius and eliminated the upper 10 and lower 10% of all of that data.
Okay, and that came up with an average of 3,300 approximately?
An average of 3,311, yes.
Okay. And did any of that include guest houses?
So I used the same tool and database that I believe that planning staff used, and that's the LA County Assessor's website. And it's my understanding that that website only counts the square footage of the main residence. It's rare that they list a secondary residence, and it doesn't include the garage or any overhangs deeper than 6 feet. So no, I didn't use anything like building permits to get the exact square footage, because I felt that there was a larger, more backed up database with all this information.
And did you analyze whether one of the things about neighborhood character is character of the lot? Did you do an analysis without the beachfront or bluff front houses?
I didn't. One can easily be done and submitted, not here live, but we can edit one for you. I just didn't see that distinction in any of the conversations that were had about neighborhood character, especially since the neighborhood standard goes back to more of a discretionary request that we felt was worse than a variance, and we didn't want to pursue. So we're trying to get you data in light of that.
Thank you.
A comment, Bonnie, and maybe you're doing this for the planning staff, but I hope, and if not, I hope you will, alert everyone who has a project now about the lighting ordinance, and they probably are smart to sort of get themselves in that neighborhood so they don't have to wait 2 or 3 years and replace all their lighting. I don't know if you're doing that.
That's a good suggestion. We'll do that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just one of those obvious things that you think about and then like, oh yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I do have a couple. I'm just trying to play through in my head the concerns that were sent in this letter. I'm familiar with this kind of situation. What you've got is, when you look at the topography and the height of existing construction and what's going to end up being the story, the guy below will have no way to put anything tall enough at his property line to restrict view if the neighbor above chooses to stand in that second-story window on a balcony and stare at him.
This is the guy who wrote the letter.
Even so, I'm just thinking, yeah. So what I was just wondering is if, I don't know how, and I see this kind of playing into the neighborhood standards, neighborhood character type of thing. And it kind of plays back to that one exception where you got a hedge higher than 6 feet because you kind of had somebody looking in. I'm just trying to play, and this is just more I don't even know if that's relevant to this project, but just how do you kind of balance the right to build, you're not obstructing any views, et cetera, with that kind of right to privacy for them downhill from the project. And the ones downhill won't be able to put anything which would kind of impede that view into privacy. any thoughts on how that could kind of be managed?
I don't understand what you mean by downhill privacy.
Sorry. Yeah. So, when you've got a large structure really close to your property line, and you've got slope between the two, and both sides of that property line are restricted to a 6-foot fence, the lower property can't put anything high enough to restrict somebody just staring into his windows all day. And I'm just trying to figure out, it's not an issue with view of ocean or anything, but how can you kind of, and again, I don't know if this project is the right place to go about it, but it just seems like it's setting up for something where
comment on that?
Yeah, please, and that's what I'm looking for.
And Jeff will probably back me up on this. There is 0 in our codes about the right of privacy. And so it's kind of hard to require it when it's not in there.
And that's why I'm putting this out there more.
Well, there's probably a quarter of the houses in Malibu have the same situation.
Although I will say, just to respond, Commissioner Mark, there's a couple ways to do it. One way, as an example, is to plant trees. So you don't have to you can't plant a solid hedge, we all know that, but there are a number of instances where you have this descending situation and an adjacent property owner downslope plants trees, and as long as they don't impact the upslope neighbor's primary view, if they decide to file one, the upslope neighbor, then you can have some trees that would limit the ability of one to just stare down unobstructedly into your rear yard. Of course, the preservation of primary view would be the concern that we could have to deal with, but as long as you maintain the trees, that realistically could provide a bit of a buffer between these two residents. And this property owner actually has taken steps to, I guess, arguably screen their view downslope by the planting of a number of palm trees along that adjacent property line, so that there isn't just no vegetation at all between their sort of deck area, if you will, and the adjacent property owner.
Okay, and I'm putting this out there just because this person isn't able to speak, and I'm trying to kind of, or not, has chosen not to speak here, but I recognize what this can lead to, and just trying to figure out what would be mitigation. And obviously, if the owner of this property does have trees, that's going to help. So I guess it's the best we can hope for.
Well, it's an interesting point. Now, I brought up with you earlier the hedge neighborhood character, and you pretty much completely shot me down on that being a good idea. But I am wondering about what I believe Joseph said about allowing the hedge to remain till the house is done to provide screening for construction and eliminating dust and all that.
I don't see a problem with that. We wouldn't be able to do a final inspection to, sign off on the house until all of it complied, including the landscaping. So I can't think of a reason not to leave a hedge in place during the construction. If I'm missing something, somebody speak up.
So it gives them an opportunity too to plan ahead for how to solve this issue going forward. I mean, does that help? Just as a thought. Jeff?
I understand you've got the limitations on hedges, which is kind of loosely defined, and when you actually try to get out there and see what a hedge is. But just hypothetically, wouldn't it be possible to condition the project for the planting of trees that would grow to a certain height, not hedge-like, no, don't mean hedges, but trees that would grow and block the view? Just hypothetically, wouldn't it be possible to condition the project that way? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, some findings for a reason that you would want to have.
Question. We could only do that if there was no view determination, correct?
You couldn't condition the trees to block someone's primary view. You would need to have a variance in order to do something along those lines.
Okay.
You could put trees in that. It'd be a plant.
Maybe I'm confused. Is that an issue here? I mean, no, okay.
I just want to make a quick comment on hedges. People inside of hedges love them, but if you live on Point Doom and you drive down Cliffside or you watch Joseph's video, you'll see many 18-foot hedges, and certain streets are becoming what I would call hallways. So it's not a trivial issue on Point Doom. Just drive down Cliffside sometime.
Do we have discussion or a motion?
I have a couple questions. Discussing neighborhood character. I think the analysis that we've seen is,
Excuse me, John, didn't I close public hearing? Sure. Okay, well, if I didn't, I am. Go on.
I think the analysis we have seen is inadequate. As you noticed by his film, as you drove around that block, you saw a lot of 1950s houses. I mean, most of them, especially on Blue Water. I think there's probably 6 houses. Yeah, Blue Water is all 50s houses, other than a couple.
Big houses on Blue Water, too. My best
Where?
friend lived on Blue Water. They're all huge.
Yeah, there's some large houses on Blue Water.
There's some on flag lots, but if you go down the street, that's basically what you see. So we need to, and obviously we can't do it here, but we need to have some kind of real standard. And I think this idea that, gee, the other buildings don't count, is we've had 4,000 square foot secondary units approved. You know, the other buildings do count, and because they are bulk and mass, and this project is 2 feet from its maximum. So I looked at it another way, and that was, I looked at bulk and mass, and when I looked at it, the new building is what, 5593, but 540 square feet of that is a deck or balcony or something, covered balcony. So I took that off and I said, okay, we're at 5,000, and the original house was 4,400. So we're 10, 12% over the original house. So it doesn't give me a lot of heartburn. Now, it's a small house, a small lot. So we have to be careful the way we look at these things. We don't take a bigger lot. As far as I'm concerned, I never want to hear the word far associated with residential. It doesn't fit, it's not used, and it's very misleading. A guy with the next door neighbor, I think, has 16 acres. So should he have a house that's a 0.30 far and, have this giant, huge hotel? No, so those are irrelevant. So I don't have a huge amount of problem with the size of this, but I have a problem with the analysis if we go on to the next one. Because if the next one's a vacant lot or something, I'm going to look at it a lot closer. I do have a problem. When I go to vote, I will consider, if I vote no, I'm going to vote because I do not believe staff can make up law, and they have in the case of basements. There's not one word, and it's not ambiguous. I went to all those hearings, and I'm quoting my favorite person, Sharon Borofsky, when she set the rules, and she said, I know what a basement is. I grew up in the Midwest. Anyway, that's it.
And she wasn't as racist. FY. So can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, move staff's recommendation.
I'll second it.
Is that with allowing the hedge to remain during construction?
I don't think that's required. It's not.
Yeah, I think that's allowed by, you can allow that anyhow.
I don't think a special condition is needed for that. If you want to require it, then that would be a different thing.
With the requirement, the hedge is allowed to, if they wish, remain till the end of construction.
There you go.
And no requirements on trees for this one, right? That was just a conversation.
I think we allow, the other neighbor's not even here. I think we allow them to just figure this out, what they want between them. I think that makes more sense, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, you couldn't meet the other neighbor's requirement. He wanted an 18-foot or 18.
Well, I'm thinking the one right below them.
Below him, yeah.
The guy down the hill.
He's got, right.
His house faces the entirely other direction, and I get his point, but.
Not, yeah.
All right.
Nothing there.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please, Kathleen?
Commissioner Euring?
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings? Yes. Commissioner Mazza?
No.
Vice Chair Marks?
Yes.
Chair Pearson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We're on to item 5B, coastal development permit number 17-070 and temporary use permit number 17-071 20, an application for the Concert on the Bluffs event proposed to take place August 20th, 2017 at 24250 Pacific Coast Highway. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening, Chair Pearson, members of the Planning Commission. The proposed project before you tonight is a temporary use permit with a coastal development permit for the Concert on the Bluffs event. Temporary events generally do not require a coastal development permit. However, the local coastal program has a specific provision that a CDP is required if the event occurs between Memorial Day and Labor Day weekends and lasts more than 1 day, including setup and takedown. The proposed event occurs in this time frame and will last a total of 4 days with setup and takedown. Therefore, a CDP is required. The event is proposed at Malibu Bluffs Park, which is located along PCH, and the park is accessed at the intersection of Malibu Canyon Road. The park is surrounded by vacant parcel on the eastern boundary, residential beachfront development on Malibu Road directly south, open space to the west, and Pepperdine and HRL are located further north. The proposed project is a temporary use of Malibu Bluffs Park for the Concert on the Bluffs. The event is sponsored by the city and will consist of a 52-piece live orchestra and ballet performance. Food will be provided by food trucks and alcohol will be served in a designated tent area. The event will be held on August 20th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. with approximately 1,400 attendees. It is open to the public and a fee will be collected for general admission. The concert stage will be located on the southernmost portion of the open multi-purpose field, and the rest of the field will be accommodated by lawn seating. Behind the stage, there will be 2 green room tents for the performers and a generator placed on the sidewalk adjacent to restroom trailers. The surrounding park will be designated for associated uses, including the food trucks on the ball field, a limited access tent for alcohol consumption adjacent to the Michael Landon Center, a fenced off tent midfield for the sponsors, and a kids play area up against the existing play area. There will be a total of 905 parking spaces available for the proposed event. In addition to the on-site parking, RIS Transportation will transport attendees in shuttles to and from the 3 off-site locations. Those include Malibu City Hall, HRL, and Pepperdine. The city has hired Kinetic Events to provide crossing guards and parking attendants at each of the locations. Kinetic Events will be stationed at Bluffs Park to direct traffic to off-site parking locations and regulate on-site parking. There will be temporary barricades, A-frames, signage, a digital changeable message board for traffic control measures. The message board will provide directional signage on PCH and Malibu Canyon Road, notifying attendees of the parking lot locations. The city's volunteer on patrol will also be available to provide traffic management services. Staff has evaluated the impacts to coastal resources and determined that the CDP findings can be made to approve the proposed project. In closing, staff recommends the adoption of Resolution 1746, approving CDP 1749 and TUP 1720 as conditioned. Staff is available for questions and the applicant.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that report. Any disclosures? Anyone?
Went last year.
Okay, none. Questions of staff? Surprise, John has a question, everyone.
No, first one is for Trevor. Since Pepperdine is not in Malibu, does that affect anything we're doing here? Because we're approving this with outside of city parking. And, you know, I just wondered if we have any jurisdiction or whatever we do there.
Well, the CDP would be for the event, which is held in Malibu. Interesting question, or there'll be another requirement for a separate CDP for the
county.
Yeah, that went into, it's not in the city. I don't know offhand, so.
Okay, good answer.
We definitely need a CDP for the main event. Whether we need an additional one, couldn't tell you just offhand.
Okay, now, you have, what? No, this is for staff. You've got 885 spaces and 1,400 guests, plus the orchestra. So you've got about 1,500 people. They all get out at the same time. How many, and nobody basically, unless you've shelled out a bunch of money, can park there. So how many shuttle buses are there? And what's their capacity?
Maybe the applicant has that answer for you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kristen Riesco. I work for the Community Services Department for the city, and working with the Cultural Arts Commission, we're putting this event together. Right now we have 4 shuttle buses dedicated to the public. Those are each 40-passenger buses. And then we have 2 25-passenger buses dedicated to the musicians and performers for the event.
So you can handle 210 people. So you have about 7 round trips to get everybody out of there. Are you going to go to each location? You're going to go all the way up to Hughes and all the way down to Pepperdine, all the way over City Hall on each trip?
We're anticipating some people will use Malibu Canyon as parking. And so some people will be crossing PCH. And we have kind of 1 shuttle dedicated to HRL, and then the rest will go to Pepperdine.
And City Hall, I hope.
City Hall has 2 25 passengers dedicated specifically.
Okay, so City Hall is 150 spaces, so that's 3 round trips. And you say Pepperdine has got how many?
So there will be 3 40-passenger shuttles dedicated to Pepperdine.
Okay, and then how many to?
1 40-passenger at HRL.
So they're all about 3 or 4 trips.
Correct.
So is it like 20 minutes round trip to each one of these? So we're talking an hour to an hour and a half to get out of there if you're the last guy?
We're hoping it'll be quicker than that. But, I mean, we have a production manager who has worked on large-scale events, and he seems to think that that will suffice for our event.
Okay. Now, you have food trucks.
Correct.
Do they pay to be there?
No, they do not.
So how do you choose who gets the big bucks for having a food truck there?
We allow vendors to give us bids to come out, and then we decide what a good menu, a variety of menus we have, and go from there.
So the bid isn't for money. The bid is, I'm going to serve tacos instead of hot dogs.
Correct.
Okay, but you never considered charging them?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Now, did they ask the local restaurants if they wanted to participate?
We do have Demores coming out as one of the food trucks.
But I'm talking about food tents or something.
No, the health department is a requirement for the TUP, as you know, And food trucks seem to be the easiest option because they already have a health department permit. So you don't have to go out and fill out or have the qualifications for the health department to set up like a vending booth.
So, as far as you know, Diamore's is the only local
That is
vendor truck?
Yes.
And they have a food truck?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how about alcohol sales? Who gets the money from that?
There won't be any sales from the alcohol. It is strictly for the VIP tent only. So it'll be like a wine tasting.
Okay. So it's free. And then,
Oh, they paid for it.
well, maybe. Depends on who's the VIP. I imagine there's going to be some city councilmen there. Okay.
Like I said, they pay for it.
Yeah, right. Okay, and then when I looked at your map, could you put up the map of the event? It looks like you said the alcohol was up by Landon Center. Where is it? Because that's the kids' area.
The alcohol will actually be served in the sponsor tent, the big yellow tent in the middle. We will have a security guard on site monitoring that tent.
Oh, okay, so that was an error when they said it was up by
Yes.
Landon Center. Okay, that's my questions.
I got a quick question. So this is a city-sponsored event. What happens if there's damage to the site? Is there insurance, or is the city just, how
We
does that work?
have special event insurance. The city is also looking into something that's called show insurance, which will cover all of our volunteers, dancers, producers, sound, that sort of thing.
Okay. And lastly, maybe this is a Trevor question. So there's off-site parking lots in various areas. Do people get noticed in that area too about the event, or just for where the central event is?
I'm sorry, I was looking at another question. Say your question
So
again?
there's a number of off-site parking lots. Does a 500-foot circle be notified, go to those parking lots as well, or just to the central event?
It only goes to the event.
Interesting. So, okay. I don't know. That seems interesting. It's kind of part of the event. I don't know. I could see some people complaining about it and wanting to know about it.
That's a good point. We can do that in the future.
So that would mean if a commissioner lived within 500 feet, if you do that of a parking lot, would they have to recuse themselves? Stuff to ponder. I don't need an answer now, but it was just kind of curious about that. Are there any more questions? Oh, I have one more question, Trevor. Should she fill out a speaker slip?
No,
She's
I
a
did
staff
not.
person.
Okay, I just want to make sure, that you don't slip and we don't follow the law entirely. Any more questions?
I move staff's recommendation.
Can I make
Okay,
a
wait.
suggestion that we?
Wait, hang on 1 second. Let me open the public hearing and close it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there any speakers on this item? I'm going to close the public hearing. We're back to
And
the
now
commission.
I move staff's
Second.
recommendation.
Second.
Okay,
And my suggestion was going to be to make sure the map is correctly identified in terms of where the alcohol area is.
Great.
okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mazza,
Everybody buy tickets? Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Chair Pearson.
So you like events if you like them, but if you don't like what they're doing, you don't like the events?
What event don't I like?
The triathlon. Anyhow, I
If
vote
you had
yes.
this on
I
Coast
vote
Highway,
yes.
I
Thank
would.
you. We're moving on to
Motion
the next
carried.
item. Going to 5C, Coastal Development Permit number 17-049 and lot merger number 17-005. An application for a lot merger and installation of a new alternative on-site wastewater treatment system at 22466 and 22500 Pacific Coast Highway. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes. The proposed project before you tonight is a coastal development permit to replace and upgrade the existing on-site wastewater treatment system with a new alternative on-site wastewater treatment system that provides tertiary treatment and a lot merger to formalize the historical use and permitting of the two legal parcels as one parcel at 22466 PCH. The subject contiguous parcels are located on the east end of Malibu on the beachfront side of PCH in the Carbon Beach area. The surrounding properties are zoned single-family medium on the beachfront side and commercial visitor serving one on the land side. Historically, the two properties have been permitted, developed, and maintained as one lot. The merger of the lot remedies the legal nonconforming setbacks due to the development crossing over the property lines. Any future development shall comply with the development standards in the local implementation plan. The tennis court shown in the aerial has since been demolished pursuant to an amended permit for the original development of the single-family residence from the California Coastal Commission. The proposed project consists of the installation of the new AOWTS to replace the existing OWTS and a lot merger. There are no proposed changes to the existing single-family residence or the existing development. The project proposes a new AOWTS due to a failed leach trench. The existing leach field crosses the property line between 22466 and 22500 PCH. And the new AOWTS is proposed in the same general location as the existing septic system. The city requested a lot merger because the leach field and existing development cross the property line, and the applicant agreed to merge the lots to bring the existing development into conformance. The site contains a vertical and lateral public access easement that will not be affected by the installation of the septic system or the lot merger. Staff has determined that the project as proposed in condition is consistent with all the applicable LCP codes, standards, goals, and policies, inclusive of the lot merger. In closing, staff recommends the adoption of Resolution 1744, approving CDP 1749 and lot merger 17005 as conditioned.
Thank you very much for that report. Do we have any disclosures? Chris?
No.
Jeff, no? Mr. Euring?
Yes, Commissioner
Pearson.
Pearson. And I visited the site. And the only thing I did learn when we went there, the applicant's architect talked to us about the septic system, and he mentioned how many times it was being pumped, which I took away was a lot. And it was interesting when we walked around to the beach side of the building to take a look in. There was some guy lying on the beach who we didn't know, and we walked in there. The first thing he looked at us and said, "I hope you guys are here to fix the septic system." So the septic system has been an issue down there. Good thing we get it fixed. That's.
I actually looked on Google so I could see what it looked like and didn't see a swimming pool. I learned that.
There's definitely no swimming pool. As Mr. Euring said, I visited the site with them, and I think did learn something that wasn't in the staff report, but it's been corrected. There is no tennis court. And that's, I believe, my disclosure on that. Okay, questions of staff? Jeff?
Question. On the project descriptions, it talks about the on-site wastewater system and so forth. And then it says the following discretionary request is included. This is lot merger 17005. In what sense is a lot merger a discretionary permit?
I suppose it's technically not discretionary in terms of there's not, it either meets those criteria or it doesn't. That's the kind of shorthand we use for where we would normally identify whether, if a site plan review or a variance or a minor modification were part of an application. So
A lot merger is ordinarily just an ministerial act, right?
Well, it does require a coastal development permit.
Well, everything.
Yeah.
Ms. Uring, any question? No. John, what, a question?
Yeah, just since the tennis court was in the original staff report, has in our resolution we're going to consider any mention of it been taken out? Because the reason I ask is I don't
think it's in the resolution. I looked.
It's been amended.
Okay.
It's been, so we're going to have an amended resolution.
You have that. It was in the supplemental.
Okay, because I do not want to have them come back later with a tennis court and say, oh, we always had lights. Okay, now.
I did want to make one suggestion. In finding C, wait, is it this one? Oh, sorry. There's an area in the resolution that identifies the wastewater system as being on the land side of PCH, and it was meant to say the landward side of the house, not obviously the landward side of the highway. So I was just going to recommend that we make that change. And
Where is that?
my note says finding C1, but that doesn't seem to be the right place.
It's there.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. It's finding C1 on page 3 of 14.
Okay.
Okay.
So we could correct that as part of your motion.
Okay. John?
So the combination of the lots is because the leach field goes across them. That's the main reason.
That's right. And there's some hardscape that also crosses the lot lines.
Okay. I assume it's still true that you can build as big as you want on these lots. So this combining could create a 30,000 plus house. Is that correct?
The beachfront development standards don't put a limit on total development square footage. So it is possible that a larger home could be built on the combined lots, but that would have to, accommodate also a view corridor and some other things that may not have applied to the original structure. So I couldn't tell you exactly what.
And we could apply neighborhood standards.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. So view corridor. They combine the lot, what is it, 25%, 20%?
It's 20% of the lineal frontage.
Okay, so the house itself is jammed up against what I want to call the west property line. So that 20% would come out basically of the tennis court land, that view corridor.
Well, it would
if they
depend
wanted
on
to
the,
improve anything.
It could be, if they were going to build a new house, presumably they would demolish the existing one, so it could be anywhere they chose to put it.
Okay, but,
It would have to be 20% of the lineal frontage.
okay, and do you have any idea what the lineal frontage is? Okay. Do we know that the present improvements, I mean, I drive the highway all the time. I didn't go actually specifically look at this house, but it's got giant walls in front of it. Was this built prior to coastal? No.
The Coastal Commission issued the coastal development permit for this house, and it's been amended a couple of times.
And those walls are in compliance with that? Because they look to be, 10 feet tall.
I don't know what the requirements
Okay.
were when they approved it.
Can I ask you, Tom?
Yes. Yeah.
No, never mind,
Yeah,
okay.
hang on one second.
Go ahead,
Just hang
open
on
the
one
hearing.
second. Okay, so we're good on questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. We have one speaker at the moment. Thomas, would you like to speak?
Yes, good evening. I'll speak to the question that was raised about whether the walls were part of the original application. The history shows that there was two houses on these properties, on each of these properties, going back to 1946. In 1986, the current house was designed and built as it currently exists. In 1991, the third floor was added, so there's a portion of the building which appears to be taller, and that was permitted through the city right after the city became, from the county to the city. The current septic system always spanned across the two lots since originally designed and built. In 2015, when the vertical access was put in, again, it received health department approval. It clearly showed that the septic system, as it currently exists in its location, was there. So the house has not changed at all since its original coastal permit. In 1986, there was a vertical access required. The Ackerbergs, who were their then owners, litigated for many years to put off putting it in. And finally, in 2014, they had no choice, but they had to follow through with their coastal development permit, which required it. The system itself, as we checked out the records for the current new owner, had been, they had received a proposal in 2009. So this system has been limped along since 2009. So in a sense, we identified that, but I think it's a tribute to the city in a funny way. And I say a funny way that there is 321, the ordinance, which requires compliance when there's a change of ownership, because this problem has existed for quite a while in terms of having a strong operating permit as far as the septic system is concerned. So we're putting in a upgraded code compliant system. And I think the reason that the lot merger is now of issue when it never was before, quite frankly, is a mystery to me. Why, when the septic system was put in, when it was permitted in '86, and again when the additional work was done in '91, there was never any question about them being two lots because part of the septic system spanned across both lots. The walls are continuous with the structure, go all the way to the end of the property. Yes, they are high, so but they were fully permitted. So, in a sense, we're just trying to legitimize a code compliant septic system. There's no intent to add square footage at this point. In fact, there's been no discussion at all with the new client, about adding anything other than getting the system operational and functional. If that speaks to your question.
Thank you.
Just one question. Oh, you're going to close the hearing, or what?
Do you have? Okay.
I was going to ask staff a question.
Well, there is. Okay, hang on. We have another speaker then.
Okay.
Norm Haney, we were actually quite worried when you weren't here. I was going to send out a search party, hoping you're okay.
I actually, commissioners, I got a little confused. People told me that there was not a city council meeting tonight. They failed to tell me there was a special meeting tonight.
We were trying to sneak one by you, and we failed.
So I had another meeting scheduled at 7:30 out of Broad Beach that I couldn't break. So anyway, following up on what Commissioner Jennings indicated, that basically a merger is not discretionary. It's the same thing as a lot line adjustment. It's not discretionary. You can't basically deny it. If a person makes an application for a lot merger or a lot line adjustment under the State MAP Act, it's not discretionary. Thought I'd bring that up. And you know, in terms of a view corridor, my guess is that the 10-foot wide access would use a portion of that. I think both these lots are roughly 60 feet apiece for a total of 120, and that would basically mean about a 24 foot wide access. Maybe Tom knows exactly how wide the lots are. At any rate, I want to make it clear that there are some things that you can do that are not discretionary, and one of them is merging lots.
Thank you, Norm.
Just to quickly speak to the point, from investigation, it appears if we were going to ever add anything to the property, it's unclear whether we get credit for the existing 10-foot vertical access or not in terms of debiting the 24 feet. The lot is, the combined two parcels are about 123 feet. And so that's basically what we know. We don't know whether we would be debiting against the 113 feet that's remaining, the 20% if we were going to do anything, or whether we would get credit for what was required when the house was permitted in 1986 for the 10-foot vertical access. I would suspect that we would have a legal discussion because it was on both the two lots that the house was represented, and we deeded the vertical access. So I would think we would get credit for it, but we haven't really pursued it because it was not our intent to add to the building at this point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to address the council on this item? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing, and we're back here for discussion and motion.
I have just one question. Is there anything in this that, well, how long do they have to fix the septic? Is there any limit? Because people get permits and then may or may not do it. So are we looking at a compliance thing, or is there anything in the resolution that says you shall fix it right away or whatever?
Yes, they do have a compliance agreement with the Environmental Sustainability Department to have the system installed by June 30th, 2018.
Wow, okay. Nobody else has a question. I move the item
I
as
do have another.
as amended.
Sorry, I did have another quick one. I'm just a little confused. Is the view corridor in question here at all, or is that no? Okay, just want to confirm. Then no, nothing else.
Okay, so I move the item as amended with the changing of the C14 to
C1.
seaward, not landward.
Second?
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mazza?
Yes.
Commissioner Euring?
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings? Vice Chair Marks?
Yes.
Chair Pearson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're on to item 5. Oh, yes, we're going to have a quick 5-minute break. Then we'll be right back at as quick as possible.
sell for X, and I thought it was a big demand, right, it's 7,000 square foot lot.
And now you're pointing out that I'm a municipal
Yeah.
1,800 square foot house.
I can't do anything
I
to
get
it.
2 quintal. Now what? Now I'm going to make it.
All right, we're going to continue the Planning Commission meeting now, and we are moving on to 5D, and I'm hoping that you won't propose any more special meetings this year. This has been brutal, and just know where my vote on that whole idea is probably going to be at this
You're
point.
not the only person I've heard from on that, and I think the entire staff would agree.
I think if the
But
city comes up with a food for us to eat, maybe a little wine, a little Chianti, a little something,
At least
That would make all of us happy.
there you go.
I am grateful for everybody's willingness to do this, and I know the applicants are too. It's been a great meeting so far in terms of getting things done, so thank you.
We're just not showing up. That's different. Okay, so item 5D, coastal development permit number 15-063, site plan review number 15-051, minor modification number 16-008, and demolition permit number 16-006, an application for the demolition of an existing single-family residence and the construction of a new single-family resident and associated development at 28885 Cliffside Drive. Can we have a report, please?
Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The project before you tonight is for a coastal development permit for a single-family residence with accessory development at 2885 Cliffside Drive. Here is the vicinity map and aerial photograph of the project site. The subject site is located on the north side of Cliffside Drive, on the landward side, located in the Point Dume residential neighborhood. Surrounding properties are zoned RR1 and are developed with 1- and 2-story single-family residences with accessory development. The portion of the parcel to be developed was disturbed in the past to accommodate the existing residents and consists of slopes of 4-to-1 or flatter. Steeper slopes exist on the northern portion of the parcel where a drainage course runs through the parcel near the rear property line. Properties near the property subjects that are similar in characteristics with respect to topography and are generally flat and descending from a cliffside drive towards the rear slopes. So the proposed project is a request to demolish an existing 1,748 square foot single-family residence, including accessory development. The project includes a request to construct a new 5,540 square foot 2-story single-family residence with a 1,286 square foot 1-story detached accessory structure that consists of a 2-car garage, a second dwelling unit, and a basement that is 1,052 square feet in area. The proposed project includes a new front yard fence, outdoor fireplace, decks, trellis, swimming pool, spa, and landscaping, and hardscaping and grading. The project also includes a new alternative on-site wastewater treatment system, and the proposed project includes a site plan review for construction up to 28 feet for a pitched roof for the main residence, and a minor modification request for a 50% reduction of the required front yard setback. Here is the site plan of the proposed project. The area in green is the main residence, which is located along the northern portion of the site. And then you have the area in blue, which is the detached accessory structure and second unit with the basement. In between the detached structure and the main residence, you have the proposed pool, which is actually reduced in size. And just to the west of that, you have the alternative on-site wastewater treatment system. Access is provided to the project site along Cliffside Drive along the southeastern portion of the site near the detached accessory structure. Here's a close-up of the proposed minor modification request. As designed, the project does not conform to all applicable residential development standards contained within LIP Chapter 3. The project provides a 44.8-foot side yard setback along the west property line and a 16.97-foot side yard setback along the east property line. The rear property line, as proposed, is at 56 feet. The applicant has requested a minor modification for a 50% reduction of the required front yard setback. Instead of designing the project with the required 62.2 foot front yard setback, the proposed detached structure provides a 35.5 foot front yard setback. As demonstrated here, the blue line represents the limits of the required setbacks. While the majority of the detached structure complies with the required setbacks, the southern portion of the structure does not meet the required setback, as demonstrated in red. Furthermore, the area of the detached structure that does not meet the required setback contains a required two-car garage. Staff determined that the proposed project as designed is not consistent with all applicable LCP code standards, goals, and policies. Essentially, as this plan demonstrates, the area where the two-car garage, highlighted here in red, which provides for a 35.5 foot setback, can be relocated to another area of the project site. It can be shifted up to the north towards the pool. It can be relocated to the west, where the existing single-family residence previously existed, just to the west of the parking area here. Okay, so with regards to the minor modification request, based on project plans, visual analysis, and site investigation, it has been determined that the reduced setback would have a potential impact on adjacent properties and neighborhood character due to the following. One, the neighborhood and various properties along the north side of Cliffside Drive share similar site and topography characteristics. Two, review of aerial photography and exhibits demonstrate that properties along the north side of Cliffside Drive share similar front yard setbacks, and approval for a setback reduction would not be consistent with the neighborhood development pattern. Number three, there are no special circumstances or exceptional site characteristics that prevent the proposed project to be designed in a manner that meets the required front yard setback for the detached structure. Number four, there are other suitable locations where the detached garage may be located to meet the required front yard setbacks. Five, the site survey and project plans reveal that the existing residence provides an approximate 64-foot front yard setback. And six, the reduced front yard setback for certain properties along the north side of Cliffside Drive have not been granted to other property owners. Therefore, the proposed project as designed has the potential to adversely affect neighborhood character, and the minor modification request cannot be supported. Here is an exhibit that was provided actually by the project applicant. Staff focused on properties along the northern side of Cliffside Drive, again because those properties are similar in characteristics with the proposed project site. Of all the properties that were surveyed along the northern side of Cliffside Drive, only two provide for a setback that's 35.5 feet or less. The properties here with the yellow arrows demonstrate the remaining properties and their existing setbacks. As you can see, you have a 75.6 foot setback, you have a 91-foot setback, you have a 74-foot setback for two properties, a 64-foot setback, and a 77-foot setback. And that is why staff cannot support the minor modification, because the proposed reduction in setback to 35.5 feet would not be consistent with the development pattern along the north side of Cliffside Drive. Staff didn't assess or use the properties to the south because they don't contain similar site characteristics. Those are bluff-top properties that would require a reduction in setback. Here are the elevations for the proposed project. The main residence will be constructed in excess of 18 feet to a maximum of 28 feet for a pitched roof. Here you have the north elevation. This is essentially what would be facing more towards the descending slopes toward the drainage course. And then you have the south elevation that would be facing towards Cliffside Drive. Here's the west and the east elevation. As you can see, it'd be the property descends from, you have the pool and the property descends from Cliffside Drive towards the rear of the property where the slopes get steeper. You'd have the proposed project not exceeding 28 feet in height. Here are the elevations for the proposed detached accessory structure. This is a structure that's going to be, again, located closest to Cliffside Drive. The applicant is not proposing to exceed 18 feet in height. As the east elevation here demonstrates, there will be a proposed light well and a proposed basement that is below the guest unit and the proposed garage. With regards to the site plan review for excess and height, the project includes a site plan review to construct the main residence of the 28 feet. The site plan review is only applicable to the main residence because the detached structure is proposed at a height not to exceed 18 feet. So the site plan review is not required for the detached structure, only for the main residence. As proposed, the overall height of the main residence complies with the 28-foot maximum height limit. Although the findings to support the CDP and minor modification cannot be made, staff has determined that the main residence at 28 feet in height may potentially be supported for approval, provided that the respective findings are made demonstrating that the project is consistent with all applicable LCP standards, goals, and policies. However, at this time, staff is recommending denial of the minor modification request as currently designed. The project does not meet all applicable LCP standards and policies. Here's the photographs of the story poles that I took on the site visit. The applicant installed the story poles in July of 2017. Staff did visit the site and determined that there are other suitable locations where the detached garage may be located and to meet the required front yard setback and maintain consistency with neighborhood development pattern along the north side of Cliffside Drive. I'm gonna get the pointer here. Here's the area where the existing residence is located. As you can see, the story poles for the detached 18-foot tall structure could be relocated to the area where the existing residence is currently located, or it can be, again, shifted in a manner that meets the required setbacks. Here you have along Cliffside Drive, there was a photograph taken of the proposed structure and how would the visibility of the structure along Cliffside Drive as you're looking northwest because of the setback reduction. Perhaps if it was set back to 62.2 feet, it wouldn't have as much of a visual impact on adjacent properties or along Cliffside Drive. As mentioned throughout the staff report, the project does not comply with all applicable LCP residential development standards. The residential development standards require an enclosed two-car garage for the proposed main residence. Without approval of the minor modification, the detached structure, the main residence cannot be approved because the proposed project would not meet all required development and design standards set forth in the LCP. In closing, staff recommends the adoption of the resolution 17-48 denying coastal development permit 15-063, site plan review number 15-051, and minor modification 16-008. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you for the report.
Chairperson, I'd like to just make a couple of additional comments. I wanted to point out that the site plan review for the construction up to 28 feet in height for the main residence was not discussed in the staff report. Carlos can give you a verbal analysis of what our conclusions are with respect to that. He kind of summarized it just then, saying that the findings could, we feel like the findings could be made to support the site plan review for the main residence. However, we somehow neglected to put them in the staff report or in the resolution. So if you, depending on what you decide to do tonight, we will make the appropriate adjustments to the resolution with respect to the site plan review findings.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with disclosures. Jeff?
Visited the property with Chair Pearson, met with the applicant, didn't learn anything that really wasn't in the staff report.
I visited the site about a year and a half ago with Chris Cortazzo, but I was looking at his turkeys, not the property.
No disclosure.
Visited the site with Commissioner Euring. I guess I learned the actual physical location of the site and what it's about. Also toured the neighborhood pretty extensively to understand neighborhood character related to the minor mod request. Discussed this project briefly with Bonnie earlier today, but nothing new out there outside what's in the staff report, and that's it. Questions of staff? John?
Can I have your pointer? A lot of these are technical, but I want to get them out there so Joseph could answer them if he has an answer. Can you go to your elevation of I guess the main house, it's A22? The side view. There you go. Okay. This number right here, this is the existing ground level. That number right there is 87. And this number here is 78. So I was trying to figure out the slope, but I could never figure out how wide the building is because there's no dimensions. Do you know the dimensions?
You want the dimensions of the
I'm
length of the building or the width?
drop and divide it by 4:1, and from all I could tell, it looked like it's 27 feet, which would mean it's much more than 4:1. So that's.
I do have a slide, a supplemental slide that demonstrates the slope analysis that calls out the actual slopes beyond the area that you're.
Well, that's my second question, but just by the numbers on this, it looks like it's over that. So the slope analysis that we got has the house stuck on top of it, so you can't tell if it's built on the slope or not. Now, my second question is, I understand this balcony here is cantilevered, and there's a bunch of references to the fact that there's two posts and they're put in specific spots where they're not on the 5:1 or 4.5 plus, which apparently is right here, according to the diagrams. But I look at this, and this is a concrete walkway. And my understanding of the 4:1 slope limitation is zero development above 4:1.
Staff did work with the applicant to ensure that that deck area was cantilevered, and it wouldn't be developed on any slopes beyond 4:1.
This is my point. This is this whole deck. That's a cement deck that's all cantilevered, because it doesn't show that. Okay. Now,
Commissioner Mazza, on sheet T 1.3 that's the slope analysis. The
T
color coded.
1.3. Did we get that?
Yes, there is an enlarged section.
Okay, yeah, I see T 1.3.
In the
But
upper right-hand corner, there's an enlargement of that cantilevered deck that might help.
Yeah, I see this. I see this line. What I'm wondering is, it seems strange that it's totally flat, but I'm trying to go back and calculate this because that's the actual dimensions of the slope.
The on sheet A 1.2, there's a dimension of I'll call it the depth of the house, the short side. The
Okay,
long-
and what is that number? I had to add 3 numbers up and I got 20.
It says 27 feet 4 inches.
Okay, well, that drop is 9 feet. So 9 times 4 is not 27. It's 36. So it's more than 4.5 to 4 to 1. It's just more than 4 to 1, just mathematically. So either the slope analysis is wrong or this drawing is wrong.
Well, when the public hearing is open, we can ask the applicant to speak to that.
Okay. Well, that was a big concern because the slope analysis is just some guy with a computer. Now, on A 1.4 is the basement. And is there a entrance to the basement from up above, or is it only from the light well? I couldn't see a top floor stairway, but maybe it's there, maybe it isn't.
Based on that particular sheet, it does not look like there's an interior connection between the ground level floor and the basement level.
Okay, so.
But the applicant could speak to that also.
Okay, but my question would be, our rationale for basements having light wells is because you need 2 entrances. This one's only got 1. Is that right? It just has 1 entrance. That's because that's what the drawing shows.
That appears to be what the drawing shows, yes.
Okay, so then we're theoretically violating the building codes. Let's see what else I had. Now, I know this is a weird question because you'd have to be around for a while to understand what I'm talking about, but aren't we using the upside down 2/3 rule on this?
On the
the
accessory structure?
Yeah.
Or the
main house. You're saying that the top floor is 2/3 of the bottom floor, but you're really saying the bottom floor is 2/3 of the.
No, we did not use the reverse 2/3. What ended up happening is we used, because of the site, there is steeper slopes and it descends a bit towards the rear of the property. Everything that's on the ground level was added as first floor, the main level. Everything above it would have been the second level, and anything over 18 feet is applied to the 2/3 rule. So I actually have a supplemental slide that will make it more clear.
Okay. Because that
here.
sounds like the 2/3 rule.
So you have, as you look at the main level entrance to the property, the 62 square feet and the 726 square feet are the covers that were added to the first floor that would provide to you the areas that total the first floor itself. So the first floor totals.
Let me get a definition of what you call the first floor. Is that the first floor? That's the second floor. So this is the first floor. Now, is this on the same level as the swimming pool?
That is actually that is the first floor because it is actually on the ground level below it. As the property descends towards the rear, that actually hits the ground, the floor of the topography of the land.
Okay,
so that would be the first floor and everything above
floor, it. The floor underneath is the first floor.
Yeah, the
And
lowest
isn't that
floor
the
is the first
definition
floor.
of the reverse 2/3 rule?
No, I think, Carlos, is the color coding on here, everything in the orange color was calculated as part of the first floor?
Yes, as part of the first floor.
Okay, so it's sort of because of the sloping site, there's the orange sections that are touching the blue are also on the ground, touch the ground, I guess, and so those are counted towards the first floor. So is the total of the first floor 2140, or is it 2140 plus 334 and 192?
Yes, that's correct.
So it's you would add all of those orange areas together.
So if you walked in the pool, from the pool into the house, you'd be entering the second floor.
You enter the main level.
Second floor.
Yeah.
That's what you're calling the second floor.
it's a split level.
Yeah, so you walk on the ground.
There's ground
from
at
the
a high
pool.
level and ground at a low level, depending on which side of the house you come in.
So you walk into the second floor, unless you're crawling up from the gully down below, you're entering the second floor,
From the south side,
the street side, yeah.
right, the street side.
Okay, now, that's what I thought we always talked about as the reverse 2/3.
What Carlos is demonstrating in the slide is that the areas that are lowest, the 2140, 334, and 192 those are the lowest, and that's, you go 2/3 of that and you get the blue, what counts as the blue, or the second floor.
Which is the floor with a pool on it.
Yes,
It's the floor under the pool, right? You're calling that the first floor.
correct.
Okay, so you take 2/3 of that and you get the second floor.
Right.
Right. But it's underneath it. The second floor is below the first floor.
No. The
Let's
second,
see, perhaps the.
Why don't we have the applicant when we have the hearing, or public hearing, why don't we have them explain it, okay?
Okay,
Okay.
that's it.
That's it. Chris?
Oh, I have one more, excuse me. There's a crawl space on here with no dimension, and it's on A31. Yeah, A31, the upper left-hand corner.
it's actually labeled as 24 inches.
No,
In
I'm not looking at that.
A31,
A31, top left.
section C, yeah, it says 24-inch crawl space.
Well, that means that whole floor next to it is 48 inches. And that's impossible.
Oh, that crawl, oh, sorry, there's two
That crawl
spaces.
space, how do we
I'm
know
sorry.
that's 6 feet?
No,
Or
that says six, it says,
doesn't say anything. I got my magnifying glass out and I couldn't find it.
let's ask the applicant about
Okay.
that one also.
Okay, that does
I
it.
think it says 6 feet, but he can clarify.
Chris?
No more.
Steve? Jeff?
Yes, I have a question.
Your microphone? Microphone?
Yeah, your mic.
Sorry. On page 10 of 17, it appears, and my questions are these. What it appears to say is that the law requires that in order to grant the minor modification, that the project has to be consistent with the policies of the Malibu LCP. What you appear to be saying there is that because you're requesting a minor modification, it's no longer consistent with the Malibu LCP. In other words, it's a little circular. You can never grant a minor modification because if you grant a minor modification, it's not consistent with the LCP. Is that really the argument you're making here?
No, it probably could have been worded a little bit better. I think the issue is that in this instance, staff, based on our analysis, we don't feel like the minor modification is supportable, in which case the garage doesn't meet the standard.
Okay, my second question is this. Your report says no special circumstances or exceptional characteristics exist on the subject property that prevent the proposed project to be designed in a manner that implements the strict application of the zoning ordinance. And as I read the LIP, there is not a word in the LIP that talks about that being a requirement for a minor modification. Where do you get that? Where do you get the special circumstances and exceptional characteristics standard?
We look, that does come from language for a variance, so that's not a specific language that is one of the findings for a variance, so that's not a finding here. However, what we were looking at is whether there were options for the project to be designed in a way that would meet this development standards. Our take on it is that the community character is in part based on
I understand where you ended up.
Yeah.
I get that. But what troubles me and what I'm questioning here is importing language from a variance provision, which is an entirely different animal, as you well know, and importing that into a procedure which contains no language like this at all. You're just making it up here. If this is going to be the standard, then let's publish to the world that, okay, you've decided that now there has to be special circumstances, because there's nothing in the code that says that.
Well, it's, again, it could have been worded in a different manner, but one of the things we were looking at is there a reason why this couldn't be designed in a way that is more in keeping with the other prevailing setbacks?
I get it, and that's all part of your neighborhood character argument, but
I understand what you're saying.
you know, I'm troubled by the importation of irrelevant standards just to make your point, right?
Jeff, what else do you have?
Huh?
Do you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Do you have a question? If it's discussion, let's wait.
No,
to
I
discussion.
just want to ask on that point, it's something that the planning director has to make a decision on. And I think what you're saying, Jeff, is there's no standard at all. So why even have a minor modification if it's automatic?
It's not automatic.
Well,
you have the neighborhood character standard, which is where they really have come down on this thing. But my point is that you don't make up standards that don't exist just in order to reach your predetermined conclusion.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Carlos? My first is the applicant related to me that the whole issue with the minor mod didn't come up till kind of late in the process, which caught them off guard. Can you comment on that?
They did propose the minor modification for the project a little while ago, perhaps prior to the issue of neighborhood compatibility. But as I did a further conformance review on the project, I couldn't determine or make the specific findings that it met the characteristics of the community or the neighborhood. So staff felt that the minor modification could not be supported, and that perhaps the applicant could make adjustments on the plans to try to relocate the actual detached garage to meet the requirements and standards of the LCP. Because there are no, again, there are no site constraints from what we've seen that will limit them from relocating that structure. If there were site constraints, we'd have an understanding, and we perhaps would have more support for the project. But as staff further analyzed the proposed project and the site characteristics, we noticed that the applicant can either relocate that detached structure to where the area of the existing residence or shift it a bit to the north. There were options available, and the applicant decided not to proceed with those options.
Well, that leads me to my second question, because when I noticed when you showed the setbacks on that side of the street, the one thing that there was different characteristics, because that property has a huge drop-off where the other properties, where they're further back, don't. So they're not apples to apples. I just wanted to point that out. This property is considerably different, and I would think that would at least be mentioned in the looking at the properties, because that one, as you know, goes down into a gully. The ones, oh, there you go. Thank you. I don't even know how you turn this thing on.
It's a little button on the side.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So like, oh, I'm still not good with the little button, apparently. I think it just died on me. There we go. Like these up here don't have a gully. This is a gully right here. So that's, to me, it's different. And clearly, now, yeah, truly, this one's back. But still, the analysis, these have development back here. This one can't. That's all. I just think that's worth pointing out. And then when I don't know, when you studied neighborhood character, did you, when I toured the street, what struck me, and it was both sides, and maybe the bluff side more, but some of the buildings that were close to the street on the bluff side, what was interesting about that is they were two-story. And I think that's far different than one story, in my opinion. So I think it's just something I want to bring up about neighborhood character. To me, two-story next to the road, now they're truly different properties, granted, but it was noticeable to me. With that, I am going to...
Could I just make one more comment? I want to follow up on what I said before. In the past, I have asked staff to include in the staff report specific references to the provisions of the LIP or the MMC that you are referencing. Had you done that in this case and said that, you know, the minor modification is governed by this particular depiction of the LIP, and here it is, then we could read it, and we could, without having to go back and check your work, we could see whether it contains a provision that says that special circumstances are required or exceptional characteristics are required. So I'm going to renew my request that you give us the law that we're supposed to be applying when you prepare these staff recommendations for us.
That's actually what we have done, and that's why it isn't cited here, because it isn't, it wasn't meant to be a quote pulling variance language into this. It was just meant to indicate that an observation, and it probably got written this way because the variance language is familiar, but when we're thinking about what are the alternative ways that things could be developed, that's kind of the phrase that pops into your head, and then you don't have to, it's easy to draft it that way, but it wasn't our intention to pull variance language into this. It was simply to describe the circumstances that there aren't constraints given the existing development on the property that would preclude this from being designed in a way that met the setback. And the law is cited in that it says, the minor modifications are pursuant to section 13.27, and then each of the 3 findings is listed. So that is, we have taken that to heart, and that was our intention.
Okay, so let me just ask the question then. Is it staff's position that a minor modification, an applicant for a minor modification, will have to show special circumstances or exceptional characteristics, or is it not?
It's part of special circumstances and exceptional characteristics, not necessarily, but the whole analysis of a coastal development permit requires that you look at alternatives and the least environmentally damaging alternative, and so that's just part of what we look at, or what are the constraints and things like that. So it's not a requirement for a minor modification, but it is part of the overall analysis that goes into a coastal development permit.
Okay, I just pointed out because in the 8 or 9 years or however long it's been that I've been sitting here, I've never seen that language before. I've never seen that standard applied before.
Well, and again, I would echo what Carlos kind of referred to earlier, that we have a new scrutiny on the adverse character effect finding, and that's, we're still working out some kinks in how we analyze that stuff too. So that's the reason for that.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. We have one speaker at the moment, Joseph Lazama, appearing twice tonight. Overtime. And I won't penalize your time if you want to also get in answering some of John's questions along the way. Maybe you're free to answer those too. Or you can ask them again, up to you.
I've notated some of the answers that I'll give to John just after the presentation. Good evening again, Chair Pearson and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Joseph Lazama, Virgin Associate Architects, 24911 Pacific Coast Highway. The project we bring before you tonight is 28885 Cliffside Drive, a proposal for Chris Cortazzo, designed by Doug Burge. 28885 Cliffside Drive is located on Point Dume and bordered by existing single-family residential development to the east, west, and north, and Cliffside Drive to the south. Here in red are the 4-to-1 and steeper slopes present on the property. As previously mentioned, it's important to bring this up on Point Dume because development upon this slopes of this nature is prohibited. Again, knowing these restraints, we work closely with our client to come to a design that fit as well with the neighborhood character as did the development standards. The development permit associated with this CDP application includes the complete demolition of the existing 2-story single-family residence, the fowl coops, shed, spa, and a portion of the existing pool. Our project has been found to be in compliance with the majority of the development standards required of this RR1 zone property. Since our clients felt that their needs could be met with the development allowed by the LCP, we did not elect to pursue an increase in height, structure size, or development area beyond the letter of the LCP with the neighborhood standards discretionary requests. We are pursuing an approval for a project that includes a new single-family residence, detached accessory structure with basement, new septic system, and front yard fence. Here's a rendering of our project from the center of the property looking north. Here's our partial landscape site plan, which shows how our development is outside of the public right-of-way. As previously mentioned, our project has been found to comply with a majority of development standards. In light of the 4-to-1 slopes occupying more than 36% of the subject property, in order to create as much usable space as possible, we have requested a minor modification to reduce our required front yard setback from 62.2 feet to 35.5 feet, or a 43% reduction. Additionally, in order to cluster development and preserve the existing building pad, we are applying to build above 18 feet, but not above 24 feet, with the discretionary request of a site plan review. 35.5 feet from the front property line is where we're proposing to start the south wall of our accessory structure, with the garage and basement below, encroaching onto the which does encroach onto the required front yard. The accessory structure includes a garage, guest room, basement with gym and storage area, and a light well. With neighborhood characteristics being the most discussed finding in recent months, we have prepared statements that we feel support the making of our finding number 2, the finding that states that the project does not adversely affect neighborhood character. Again, since it is our understanding that City Council has not provided the Planning Commission with a definition or direction on this neighborhood character issue, we look towards a general plan for guidance. The general plan states that the essential character of Point Dume has a predominance of single-family homes on lots that are extremely large for parcels on the ocean side of Pacific Coast Highway. Point Dume has a lack of sidewalks and streetlights, as well as roads that are rarely flat and rarely straight, which adds to the rural atmosphere prevalent on Point Dume. Many homes have views or sounds of the ocean, while others have mountain views. The surrounding beaches are both traditional Southern California wide sandy beaches, such as Westward Beach Road, as well as more unique beaches like Big Dume with its extensive tide pools. Original construction on Point Dume customarily consisted of single-story ranch-style homes in the 2,000 square foot range with the building standard type interior finishes. However, most homes constructed on Point Dume since approximately 1985 have been large, often finished in an opulent style with widely divergent styles, and such homes now constitute a significant, although not overwhelming, portion of Point Dume. Such larger homes are primarily prevalent on the perimeter drives and bluff streets, such as Cliffside and Birdview, while original styles predominate elsewhere, like Wandermere. As previously mentioned, this section goes on to describe the commercial, recreational, traffic, crime, and crime hazard patterns on Point Dume, but we feel that it's most important to note that even at the time of the city's incorporation, there was a strong understanding of the amount of square footage and type of construction to come. So if the language of the general plan tells the story of Point Dume, then the MMC and the LCP enforce the prediction of its growth. This slide depicts the area we studied in our comprehensive look at the character around this project. Out of the 27 properties east of Fernhill on Cliffside Drive, 15 have front yard setbacks less than the full required 65 feet, and 10 have front yard setbacks less than our 35.5 feet. The proposed front yard setback is in the 39th percentile of front yard setbacks in this neighborhood and the 46th percentile of square footage in the neighborhood. We feel that not only does the size of our proposed project respect neighborhood character, but the location does as well. In closing, commissioners, I ask that we open up a conversation about how this project can be approved tonight and possibly propose modifications for approval instead of denying the project completely based on a small portion of the entire project. Options we can go through and hope to have an open dialogue about how possibly we do maintain neighborhood character and don't propose any changes. We're open to possibly separating the buildings, having the less intensive use maintained at the 35.5 foot point, and moving the slightly more intense use of the guest unit closer to the pool and possibly a full setback. The movement of the entire structure as a whole, including basement. And if we're unable to come to something that I'm comfortable agreeing upon without the property owner here due to family issues, I'd ask for a continuance. John, you asked about the width of the main house, and I can confirm that it's 27 feet, 7 inches, sorry. Our color-coded slope analysis doesn't identify the slopes that we're building on as 4:1, nor does it the walkway. We are positioning supports for the decks on the opposite sides of that elevation to avoid 4:1 slopes as well. Currently, the basement only has access from the light well, but we may be talking about modifications to that building, and adding an interior stair may be something that we can propose. And that crawl space on the main house, I believe it was 2-3 left-hand corner, has an interior height ranging from 24 inches to 6 feet. This concludes our presentation for this evening, and I'm here for any additional questions that you may have.
Thank you, Joseph. Anyone else wish to address the commission on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and come back this way for discussion.
I just want to
Please
pick up on what Joseph was saying. One of the worst things I think we can do is to try and sit here and redesign the project on the fly. My suggestion would be that, and I know if we deny a project, then that bars it from being reconsidered for a period of time.
I'm with you already. I think we can do a straw vote
Suggestion
as we
is to
go.
maybe send them back and let them redesign the thing and bring it back.
I 100% agree.
If that's the direction of the commission, that would be our suggestion as well.
Before
Well,
we make a
yeah,
motion,
let's
can I
have
ask a
discussion
question?
first, a little discussion.
Yeah, I'd just like, Joseph, that elevation I pointed out shows a 9-foot drop in 27 feet. Is the elevation wrong, or is the slope analysis wrong?
We're basing our drawing off the color-coded slope analysis, knowing that they're not 4:1 slopes, and proposing development either cantilever over them or to avoid them.
Well, the actual house, though, shows itself being built on greater than a 4:1. 27 and 9 just don't work out to 41. So either the drawing's wrong, the math's right, either the drawing's wrong or the slope analysis is wrong. And that's where I have a problem.
I think it might be a good time to point out that there are existing planters in that area. I'm not sure if the overall drop is from the pool side of the house down into the ravine, and we're averaging more than we should be in looking at that area. There are slight terraces that...
But the drawing doesn't show any terraces. It's original slope. It's just, can you put that up, Carlos? There, give me have the little lighting thing.
I was just looking for the color-coded slope analysis, but it doesn't look like we have a slide for that.
And if we send, come back, I mean, hopefully you can fix this, but that slope is gradual. There's no terraces, there's no nothing. It's just gradual.
And I think what we can do for you is show you the grade right where, for example, that shadowed person is standing. The section that's cut in this drawing can be offset anywhere from 10 or 15 feet from the building to get the elevation in this drawing. And we can move that cut through the land and closer to the building to show you what it looks like immediately adjacent to the stairs.
But when you go to the color-coded slope analysis, it's virtually a straight line. So I don't think that's going to help you. If you put that up, you can see it.
I seem to have, okay. I don't have a
See,
copy.
it's virtually a straight line in front of the building. So You can take all the sections you want. If those numbers on that elevation are right, that's wrong. So that's, if we continue this, hopefully you can come back with a better slope analysis or a better drawing. Okay, well, I think that Jeff's point is taken, and I would like to make a motion for a continuance. Do we want a date certain?
I just want to discuss it first that, to me, I on the minor mod, it feels like we've handed them out pretty easily in the past. I mean, I don't see that this is, I'm just giving you my opinion. I don't see how this affects neighborhood character. And I drove that neighborhood more than once. There's other bigger stuff on the road, it's hard to see in the video, two-story stuff. So personally, I don't think it affects neighborhood character. I just don't see it. But with that said, if there's, to your point on the slope, I don't know. I mean, that can be investigated. But if the mood is that minor mod's not supportable, then I would definitely go for a continuance, but I don't think we could pick a date on it at this point, right?
I would just ask that it not be the first meeting in August. We already have a meeting for that, and these 2 nights are, I'm sure, rough for you, and as they are rough for me. So
I assume it would take you longer to redesign it than that. Anyhow.
Yeah, depending on if you want to give the applicant any direction about what you have in mind, then yeah, that might affect the timeline.
I'd like to get a straw vote. Where are you leaning?
I'd like to comment then on the minor mod. You have to realize that the house directly next door, we approved within the last 2 years. It's essentially the same lot, same owner, maybe the same architect, and it wasn't a minor mod. For a good reason.
I don't know that project in front of me. I don't remember it, so it doesn't actually help me. I mean, I hear you.
Did you design that one?
No, I believe that was Bill at a time that I wasn't with the firm. So I know he's a client of ours, and it appears to be Doug's hand in that, but I'm not sure.
Well, for what it's worth,
I'm just trying to get a mood of the commission here.
For what it's worth, I'm sort of in between on the minor mod. Staff threw out the suggestion, well, there are places where you could do this with, you could adjust it, and Joseph's comments kind of indicated maybe he thought that there were, and I would be interested in seeing some attempts to reduce the amount of the minor modification, if that's something that is not completely unfeasible. So.
And I didn't drive the street, but I see what you're saying, Mikey, where it does, it's not like dramatically out of character. It seems kind of quote unquote reasonable, but I also agree that if it can be moved without major impact, I'd rather see that, so we're closer to.
So let's go for continuance. Do you want to try and pick a date now, or do you want to work that out with staff?
What are we thinking as a date?
I think it's difficult to say without. My suggestion would be to a date uncertain, and then we'll renotice when you know what kind of changes you might be making, and we can make sure that the other departments have a chance. Like environmental health can make sure you're not on top of the septic system, and geology's fine with it, which they probably will be because it's not on the bluff or whatever. So that'd be my suggestion. I mean, if you want to speculate about a date, I would recommend probably something a couple of months out, just to be realistic.
I think is there anyone to say, isn't there only one meeting in September, or the first meeting in September?
We have 2 meetings for the rest of the year, each month.
I think we would be comfortable with the first meeting in September if we can lock that in.
I think my suggestion would be the second meeting in October, just because of the stuff that we've got lined up already. Although, if you think you can have it.
I mean, with the time that we spent processing the project before the minor mod became an issue, I'm sure out of respect for my client, I just have to ask for something sooner.
We could,
Bonnie?
Yes?
If we do a date uncertain, he doesn't have to renotice, does he?
Yes.
We
Yeah. You would. So we would just need to know.
You have to go to a date certain to avoid renoticing.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Okay,
want
but
to.
if we did a date certain, then we could just continue again, right?
Right, you could.
So if we don't.
It just doesn't, I mean, not that there's a lot of neighborhood participation in this particular hearing, but sometimes it's an issue with
Yeah,
neighbors that don't
so
know
I
when
would
to come back.
suggest we do the second meeting in August, and if he can't make that date, we continue it.
Second meeting in August.
Or the first meeting in October, either one. I mean, we've been jammed up for so long, I mean, I don't like midnight meetings, so hopefully you get
We currently have six
Don't ask so many
six hearings on the second meeting in August.
Okay, how about the first meeting in October? Does that sound good?
It sounds like if we were to go to the
I mean
second.
September, September.
Yeah, with 6 items on that agenda, it sounds like we'd be going to the first one in September anyways, right?
Okay, so I'm gonna move the first meeting in September.
I will second it. Can we have a roll call on the motion?
Commissioner Mazza,
Yes.
Chair Pearson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks.
Yep.
Motion carries.
Move
Okay,
to
motion
adjourn.
adjourn. Seconded, third, fourth.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. I'll come back and find you Wednesday. I can't tomorrow. I'm gone all day. So I apologize. I do want to be. But I made a note in my calendar. Well, we'll see you soon. Yeah. It is very. It does.